We will call the Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting to order, the November 24th meeting 2015. Those in attendance, Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattapanai District, Mr. Jeff Black, representing the Western Caroline District, Mr. Reggie Underwood, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Wayne Akers, representing the Madison District, Mr. Jeff Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, and I'm Calvin Taylor, and I represent the Port Royal District. If we could stand for the invocation at this time. Let us bow our heads. Our Father in heaven, we come to Thee at this hour, thanking Thee for Thy blessings, and thanking Thee for this opportunity to meet and to discuss those things which prove to be of interest and importance to the citizens of this county. We ask You to give us guidance and wisdom, and help us to make those decisions that prove to be in the best interest of those that we serve. These and all the blessings we ask in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. If you would join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, no amendments.
Okay. There are none. Then the agenda will stand approved as presented, and that takes us to opening board comments. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have a couple today. Excuse me. Last week I attended the opening of the VRE Spotsylvania Station, represented the county there. It was a $25 million expansion that was the first station added in, I think, almost 23 years was the actual number. So we hope it doesn't take that long to continue the expansion, but we'd like to see it expand as soon as possible. Another transportation issue, I don't know if the rest of the board got a email yesterday about HB2, but there were, I think it was in the paper today, there were 321 applications that totaled $6.9 billion with $1.2 billion available. So we are part of that 321, and I just wanted the board to be aware in case you didn't see it, but it could get quite interesting when the final selections are made in, I think, January and February. And then the last one is, since our last board meeting, there have been several terrorist attacks. And I would like to offer my prayers to Paris, of course, Mali, and the other sites that were affected. And really remind everyone that these criminal acts will not derail freedom. They will only strengthen our resolve to achieve it. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black, do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just have one. On Saturday, I had an opportunity to attend the, I guess it was a Thanksgiving dinner put on by the McShin Foundation for the Caroline County Recovery Program. I think that is a great program that is here in Caroline. I had the opportunity to talk to a couple individuals who were in the program and exactly what the program meant to them. So it was kind of pretty touching, and it's nice to see some success stories from that program. So these are people who are trying to get back on their feet and getting some help. So rather than go through the cycle of continuing to go into jail continuously, obviously I think it's a little bit, it's working quite well. So that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Mr. Underwood?
Only one comment, Mr. Chairman. With Thanksgiving coming, I'd ask that we all think of others, and certainly if we know of anyone who's less fortunate, who needs a hand, certainly in the spirit of Thanksgiving, let's do all we can to ensure that every citizen has a hot meal on Thanksgiving Day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Mr. Akers?
I have no comments.
Okay. Mr. Seeley?
Along with Mr. Underwood's comment, I will tell you that social services was a few short on a few baskets, and the community has come out in great success in helping fulfill those needs. And I think that those in need that everybody was aware of, and the few that the churches take care of that people may not be aware of, have been taken care of. And I will say that the county citizens have been more than gracious and more than helpful for those folks. And I want to thank social services for all they did in that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. I just have one. I would like to remind the board and certainly the citizens of the December 3rd Senior Citizen Gala. It's quite an affair, and we give honor to the senior citizens of the county. So that's December 3rd. I believe it's from 6 to 9 at Caroline High School. We may want to get there a few minutes early. As you know, there was quite a bit of construction going on, and I don't know how it will be affected, but at least we want to get in there and get the senior citizens in, and certainly I'm sure that it will be a grand occasion, as it always is. That's all that I have. That takes us to presentations and reports. We have a discussion of the upcoming General Assembly session. We have in our presence the Honorable Mr. Robert Bobby Orrock Sr. From the Virginia House of Delegates. Mr. Orrock, it's always a pleasure to see you, and we appreciate you taking your time to be with us tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and staff. It's my great honor and pleasure to be here this evening. You know, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as I stand here before you, I sometimes wonder why I even got into politics from the standpoint my father, having served for 12 years on this county board, frankly, as a child growing up, didn't leave me with the best impression of what getting into politics was necessarily going to be. And I very much commend y'all for your service to the county. I remember very poignantly my father's remark one evening when he'd come home from a board meeting kind of late, and I still happened to be up. And he commented, he said, you know, Bobby, if I do my job right, I think I will probably upset more people than I will ever make happy. He had kind of come to that considered conclusion. In spite of that, I still got into politics. I'm not sure what that says about my judgment, but that's another matter. But it's my pleasure to be here with you all this evening. In general, with the session coming up, the good news is we are looking at some additional revenues. The bad news, in hearing from the Chairman of House Appropriations, almost all of the additional revenues that we're looking at for the coming biennial budget will be absorbed by the re-benchmarking of K-12 education and the increased state demands of our share of Medicaid. And that's without Medicaid expansion. That's under the current Medicaid program. That just continues to escalate far beyond any other measure of inflation or anything else. And we're, of course, mandated to pay that. One particular matter of interest with you here, the board, and the citizens of Caroline, Supervisor Black contacted me and shared with me a resolution about grass cutting. I will say over my tenure in the General Assembly, that has been one of the more interesting discussions. And it took a long time, but finally, the legislature passed provisions whereby any county can. However, it doesn't address the circumstances that here in Caroline have arisen, y'all are trying to address, because agricultural land is not included in that automatic county ability to levy, cut the grass and then levy the cost of same. I've had legislation drafted and will be forwarding through the General Assembly process a clarification whereby, and we're kind of going back and replanting a Christmas tree as the old one used to be, where that Caroline County would be the first ornament on the tree, as it were, but where if a county wishes, in agriculturally zoned properties that are assessed at residential or commercial use. So that residential parcel, or if there's a commercial entity on the agricultural land, then the county would have the ability, if they're not maintaining it properly. I think that we're doing that narrowly enough where that the farming community will not be concerned about the potential impacts of this type of legislation. So that's my intent, and I will tell you all that that has been drafted, and it will be in the I'll probably be pre-filing it here within the next few weeks and soliciting input from the other delegation from the county. It is my great honor not only to just represent Caroline, but even though I represent the smallest portion within the House of Delegates, I do live here in the county and take great pride in being recognized when I'm called on the floor of the Assembly as the gentleman from Caroline, because I've always been. But mostly, that's pretty much it. I was going to keep it short, take any questions or comments from the board that you may have this evening, and look forward to working together as we always have.
Thank you, Delegate O'Rourke. And I'm sure the board has some concerns. I just have a couple of, I was particularly glad to hear you speak of the K-12, even though I know it makes it difficult because there are other funding needs other than education, and I do understand that. But I did have the honor of serving as the chairperson for the Education Steering Committee for VACO. And VACO has been very much supportive of the K-12 funding, to the fact that a letter has been sent to the General Assembly in that regard. And just one or two other things.
Sure.
Since we got you, you know how that goes. One of the concerns that the board, that the steering committee also had was the joint resolution 256 for the state funding of charter schools. And of course, it is not VACO's intention to tell the state, what to fund. We just want to hopefully make sure that it does not cost public education dollars. And that's the concern that VACO has about that, is that, if we fund charter schools, what is that going to do, or is that going to impact funding for public education? So that's something that we were concerned about. And one of the other issues was the school resource officers in every school, as far as it being a mandate, because again, if it's a mandate, we are concerned about the funding impact that will have on school systems, and certainly some of the larger school systems with many more schools than we have really was the driving force behind that. So,
and we are very sensitive to unfunded mandates of any description, but that one in particular. And we're in that difficult situation where in today's world, with the increased threats that we're seeing all around us, how do we adequately protect our children? On the issue of other education issues, as a career educator yourself and myself and Board Member Black, we fully much appreciate that. The figures that we've had shared with us, that if charter schools are done properly, it actually can be a win-win, where that they will not be funded to the same per pupil basis as typically they're funded in the public education system, and by removing them from the public education system, and they don't take all of the money, as it were, with them, we actually have a net gain for public education in the process. That is the objective, plus to give parents greater flexibility and educational choice and make them more involved in the education of their children.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, I think you had your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. O'Rourke, the gentleman from Carolina. It's a pleasure to have you back home. We appreciate that. We've got a kind of a long relationship here. With regard to the General Assembly session, I know VACO has sent another recommendation on broadband, and you can understand more than other delegates in more urban areas how critical it is here. I've often said we use the world will beat a path to your door if you can build a better mousetrap. Now you have to be connected to the internet, and a great deal of our population doesn't have that. And anything the Commonwealth could do, we tried to get a connection when Verizon put their last antenna on, but there was some federal legislation that prohibited them from helping us. So anything that the Commonwealth could do, we'd appreciate that.
And I very much appreciate it. I live on the east side of 95, so I feel the pain of the folks in the trailer park on the other side have far more services than me across 95 have. Funny that, but anyway.
Well, most of the county doesn't have service, so that's really a problem. And then just a couple of more. One is, we had talked to the State Fair of Virginia before this year's fair event got shortened by rain, and they had talked about eventually having an admissions tax. Or,
Which of course would require legislation.
right.
Right.
And I'm not sure they would be able to do it this year, but maybe we should call it an admissions fee, since I know how that three-letter word scares a lot of people. But if you could start to at least see if that's going to be a possibility. We'd intended to come to you with their concurrence. I haven't even bothered to do that this year because I knew their revenue was lower.
Right. I will share, when issues of that type have come before the Finance Committee of late, there's been almost no appetite for their passage unless there's a requirement of a local referendum for the enactment. So I throw that out for what it's worth, that if it is to go forward, I think there would have to be a requirement that it would be put to voter referendum in Caroline before it could be effected.
Okay, okay. Well, that's an option.
Right.
All right, that's a possibility. I mean, we could do that. And then we could, well, we'll still call it an admissions fee, just to make it
What did
feel
Romeo
better.
say? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet or not, but anyway.
We've actually danced around this in a lot of different ways. So, doesn't matter party or level, we've danced around it. It's, you know.
And we've all been bitten by it over the years.
It is what it is. It is what it is. And the last one is, you did mention funding for schools. One thing that we desperately need in Caroline is, when you compute the formula for school funding, there's no transportation component.
Right.
And we have a very large rural county. If you give us the same amount of money that you give another system the same size, you're actually giving us less because we have to use more for transportation. Is there any way that the Commonwealth would consider that as part of the funding mechanism?
Unfortunately, you end up with more losers than you do winners, quite candidly. Anytime you try and readjust the formula. The Pittsylvania County, the largest geographic county in the Commonwealth, has the exact same problem, although even greater than here in Caroline. And it's a matter that has been discussed. With the ever-increasing urbanized representation among the 100 members of the House of Delegates, rural jurisdictions face ever-increasing challenges in trying to have those needs met. We're very cognizant of them, we're aware, and so far, pretty much about the best we've been able to do is make sure they don't, kind of like the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. But so far as increased funding because of the geographical challenges, I'm not optimistic, but we can try. We can try and run it up the flagpole again.
Well, I'd like you to try and consider the amount of revenue Caroline just from Carmel Church, and its gasoline taxes and fuels taxes sends down to Richmond. And it goes down to Richmond really fast and really in a big truck. And when it comes back from Richmond, it's really slow and in a little tiny pocketbook.
The funny thing, the folks in Fairfax say their truck sending it down there is even bigger and goes even faster, and they get even smaller trucks, as in, coming back. So, but I understand. I do
We could put up a toll on Carmel Church. We'd be happy to put up a toll and catch their money too. But I think you think
Right. No, I
you
fully
understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Black?
Yeah, I just have more of a statement. I think you and I have talked about this at school. You have in front of you, I've given you something that was put together by a lady in Charlottesville, a lawyer in Charlottesville, with regards to private water companies. I would just say that the constituents and anyone that's served by Aqua Virginia would, I'm sure, be very grateful for your support.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And I have looked at it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Underwood?
No comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you,
Akins?
Mr. Underwood. Appreciate that.
I do. Delicate Arc, your dad and I, we served the same district, and a lot of the same people. Not, of course, the people have changed over the years, but I appreciate he served my family when he was a board member, and I appreciate what he did for Caroline County. The couple of issues, and I don't know if there's anything going on in the General Assembly. I haven't heard that there are, but I do know that every time it appears that there is a group that comes and makes some noise about the BPO tax, about the machinery and tools tax, and those type of things, it appears that the legislature gets excited about it and they want to do something to help those people out. And I don't think any I know Carolina, and I don't think any other locality has implemented the B poll tax just because they want to implement B poll tax. We used to have a merchant's tax in the county, and to me that was a much more unfair tax than the B poll, because it only dealt with inventories at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year, what you had on inventory. So that only hit the merchants that had the grocery stores and the car dealerships and all of those type of things. So to me, it was a totally unfair tax because it was only hitting a few of the people. B poll tax means a lot to a county such as Caroline County, especially under today's circumstances where Caroline County is starting to prosper and starting to move ahead and starting to develop. So I would trust that you would protect as best you can the B poll tax and the machinery and tools tax that's out there, because those are sources of revenue that are very important to counties such as Caroline County, and we need to maintain those counties. I mean those revenues if we want to be fair to the citizens of the county. The other is the local land use authority. Oftentimes we see the General Assembly, I'm not speaking about you personally, I'm talking about the General Assembly in general. They feel like they know more about how to control a local level than the local officials do, and I can assure you that's not true. Most of the General Assembly members have never served in local government, and so they don't know what the issues are that we at local government level have to address and try to take care of. Again, I'm asking you to protect this land use authority that the counties have for the future generations. My time is short here, so I'll not worry about a lot of that, to be honest with you, in the coming years. But I think the people that do serve Caroline County have to be cognizant of where their funds come from. And it cannot necessarily be from the landowners in Caroline County through real estate taxes. Transportation, to me, that's one of the biggest issues we're going to face right now as a county. With the developments that are coming, the Walmart, which is looking to come at Ladysmith, the Harris Teeter in Carmel Church, we really need help. And I don't know whether there's anything you can do, because I know there's a formula now that the HB2 formula, and I know that's where we're going to have to get most of our money from in order to make some big projects happen. But anything you can do to help us and that you can suggest to us as a county to bring about those things, I just feel like this board would appreciate that, because to widen 639 to the measure that it needs to be widened to manage that traffic, I think we've said we're talking about $28 million, or something along those lines. It'll be a long time for Caroline County can afford $28 million in order to widen that road. So we just need your continued help, and we appreciate what you've done. I truly do there in Richmond. We just need your continued help to help us move ahead.
I appreciate it, Mr. Akers, and as you know, having graduated from Ladysmith High School and largely driving the exact same roads as when I started driving, I won't say how many years ago, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I understand.
The money hasn't been forthcoming from the state, and HB2 is kind of a mixed bag for counties such as Caroline. It was done largely out of compromise because the urbanized areas were screaming, wanting more revenues. And HB2 was a part of the solution to that, and also to try and prioritize better the finite resources we have and get the biggest bang for the buck, as it were. That being said, here again, the more rural jurisdictions tend to come out on the losing end of that equation. It's been interesting during the entire tenure I've been down there. There are two formulas I've never heard anybody say they like: the school funding formula or the transportation formula. And we frequently had bills in that would change the dynamic and the pieces and parts, but it's always ended up with more losers than winners. And in politics, things don't pass when more people are going to end up losing money than benefiting from it. You raised B-poll, and that is also an issue that every year comes up. I will say within the legislature there is significant sympathy for a modification of B-poll where it would be based not on the gross revenues, but rather on the net revenues, because BPOL is levying on a company or an entity that may actually be losing money.
I understand.
We have not gone that road because at the end of the day, absent finding another revenue tool for local government, then we're robbing one of the tools, taking away one of the tools that you currently have in your tool chest. And we know that's not being fiscally responsible to our local government citizens. But I would just say maybe in working within the committees in VACO, they could come up with some ideas, whereas we find a different revenue source to do away, because I've heard the argument all along, you know, the B-poll tax was established to pay for the War of 1812. Well, I think we paid for it, but the tax is still there. And it's because we've never found anything to replace it to give local governments that revenue stream to provide the services that your citizens demand.
But unfortunately, we're fighting the war of 2015
Yes.
now. And
With
so
money from 1812. That's
yeah, but
really
for money from
crazy.
18, that's exactly right, from the resources from 18.
Yeah.
But no, I understand where you're coming from, but again,
Yeah.
it's, the General Assembly has restricted local
Right.
governments as to what taxes they can impose.
Right, being a Dillon Rule state, that's right.
Absolutely. And so you tell us what we can impose, and when we impose those taxes, then someone wants to take those abilities away from you. But they don't want to take the services that you pay for through those taxes away from you. And my thoughts are, and VACO has come up with it, because I was president of VACO in 2005, and we came up with some thoughts as to, hey, you take over some of the responsibilities that we are now paying for. You know, Comprehensive Services Act is a prime example. You used to pay, I don't mean you, but the state used to pay for it. Who pays for it now?
Right.
The local government pays a large portion of that funding.
The formula there has changed from the state.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, we're to the point now where there's only so much that you can take from local governments before you either have to cut services, and that's not going to be good for you or for local government, or you have to find some other source. And unfortunately, the General Assembly has not been willing to look at other sources of revenue for localities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Hart.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Mr. Seeley?
Delicate work, and I get to speak frequently, and rather than tie up any more time, I will pass for tonight, Mr. Taylor.
To put it another way, he'll beat on me privately later. No, but not that any of you have done that. But
I understand. Again, Delegate Art, we really appreciate your being here, and we certainly appreciate your service in the House of Delegates and what you've done for Caroline County and certainly the other jurisdictions as well. Thank you again for being here.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. And I will, in particular, Board Member Akers, brought the point. The distinction between rural and urban counties has gotten pretty blurry in recent times, because the services that the citizens demand are pretty much the same now, whether from Fairfax or wherever. And y'all don't have nearly the revenue stream, the tax base, the per capita income of the citizenry in order to generate those revenues. So y'all are in a particularly difficult posture in that regard. But I would commend you for your service. Some of you will be departing the board shortly, and I want to extend my personal appreciation for your dedication to service to the citizens of this community. And you have served well and served very honorably, and I commend you for that, because that's all at the end of the day. Any of us who seek public office, when it's all said and done, we need to be able to say we did as best we could, and go home and sleep at night having done the best and putting myself out there. So thank you all again, and wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and happy holiday, and look forward to working with you. God bless.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to an update from the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, Mr. Kerry Roberts.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a PowerPoint if I don't break your iPad here. What am I supposed to do now, Pam?
Speak into it.
Speak to it? Act nice? I have hard copies if you'd prefer. Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to, as I had mentioned when I was here back in the winter, I want to come by at least twice a year and give you a general update of activity. I do want to say that I've been here a little over a year now, and enjoy very much working with Gary Wilson and the team here in the county. I think we've had a very productive year, a very active year of things that we've been able to do together. Which one of these things do I push? Well, let's try this. Nope. Which one? Oh, on the keyboard?
N for next.
Oh, N.
P for previous.
N for next? Is that like N
Forward,
for
backward?
on a Nebraska helmet for knowledge? Is that the same?
I don't know.
Okay.
P is backwards. I don't know where you
Okay. This is a comparison of activity. This is how we track what we do on a monthly basis. As you'll see, first quarter of fiscal 2015, we do run on a fiscal year like the local governments in the region. You can see that at the end of the first quarter of last year, we had 4 inquiries. Those are prospects, projects. We had about 3,000 hits to the website. The average stay on the website is about 2 minutes. We had 63 research inquiries, and that could be either from our colleagues in the localities, or more often than not, it's from the commercial real estate community looking for information based on the subscriptions, data subscriptions that we have and we can work with. And you can see the type of activity that we had. Outreach is either e-blasts, our newsletter. We've got a database with nearly 3,000 constant contact names that we reach out to on a regular basis. Prospect meetings, and then how many visits that we had from prospects and site consultants. Year end, we worked 34 projects last year. 20 of those were referred from VEDP, and 14 of those were direct to the regional alliance that either they came to us directly or we found them through networking opportunities. You see a significant jump. If you went back year over year, we worked 9 projects in 2014, so a pretty significant jump from 14 to 15. A lot of that is owing to an improved economy. But we also had a pretty significant jump in website traffic. We've moved completely away from any form of advertising other than web-based, and it seems to have paid off for us. And then you can look across and see, the number of research projects that we had and track that along. I will return to this. You'll see how this gets migrated to a metrics chart, which would lead you to an ROI based on our budget. And then there's a comparison here to the first quarter of 2016, a pretty significant jump in projects. This has continued into October. Our website sessions, as you can see, continued to be up dramatically. We're more than double what we were, or right at double what we were first quarter of last year. And then again, you can look across there. I think both what we're doing on the website, what we're trying to do on sourcing leads more directly, as you'll notice, of the 10 projects in the first quarter of this year, 6 of those were direct to the regional alliance. These are organizational metrics. This just speaks more to internal goals. I know Mr. Akers is familiar with this because this is the type of information we report to the board. We did pick up 5 new private sector investors last year. We came in about $10,000 under our expense budget. We do have a significant turnover in our board, and we're recruiting new members this year. We have a 16-member board. And we had 100% collections on all pledges from the private sector, as well as what was appropriated from each of the localities in the region. Currently, we are a little over 52% privately funded. In other words, the private sector picks up 52% of our budget, 48% is from the localities. How that compares with other regional alliances, most are anywhere from 60 to 80% publicly funded. The information that you saw on the activity log, this is how it got migrated into a year-end metrics chart. The rest of this will be populated forecasting out into the future. Our board has been presented a new 3-year strategic plan. They are reviewing that now. Hopefully it'll be adopted in February, which is when our next board meeting is. And then what we'll do is we'll come down the other side, where we project out how many projects we will work in a given year, how many are in the pipeline, how many announcements we expect to get from that. As I mentioned, last year we worked 34 projects. There were 2 projects carried forward from 2014 into 2015. So that's what the pipeline means, how many were brought forward from the prior year, and then you start adding to it with current year projects. We did have 3 announcements in the region. They had a total capital investment, and those 3, we had more announcements than 3 announcements, but those are 3 announcements where we were involved with their search, with providing them information. Yes, sir?
Can you tell us if any of those were in Caroline?
None of them were.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. One of them looked in Caroline, Mr. Seeley, and you were very competitive. Just,
That was the distribution center?
yes, sir. That started out as a regional project. A little bit of how long I know you guys are working on another very significant distribution center. That distribution center actually started as a regional project in 2005 and 6. So it's been around a long time. I commend you for how hard you've worked on that one and for the work Gary's put in on it. But that's how long this takes sometimes. The connection, you may be aware of this, but the distribution center that you all are referring to that ended up in Spotsylvania, there was a common site consultant between who worked the project in 05 and who was working the Lidl project this year. So you never know, when you start building those relationships, how they'll ultimately come back to benefit you. So there is a linkage there. Unfortunately, it takes longer than we would like sometimes. 127 million in capital investments from those 3 announcements and 250 jobs. To put in perspective how big a deal that is statewide, the average statewide announcement last year was 90 jobs and I think a little over 14 million in CapEx. So, very, very significant. We did carry forward of the 36 odd projects. There's a mix and a flow in there. Some announced, some went away, some went somewhere else. But 26 we carried into the beginning of this fiscal year that were still active, that we are working, and then 10 have already been added. Actually, that number will go up in October. We've picked up about 4 more projects since the end of the first quarter that we are working. Any questions on this? Website traffic. 30,000 website hits is an interesting number. It's a large number for a regional organization of our size. We track the origin of those by state, and then we can drill down to regions within that state. What we can't tell is what the company is. Sometimes we can guess what industry they're from depending on where on our website they go. But we slice and dice this on a monthly basis. And for most of last year, these are the top 20 states that we had website hits from. The blue are regions, states that we are considering visits to this year. The yellow are ones where we made trips to last year. Actually, Connecticut, we've already gone up there once this year and had met with 3 prospects. I have to go back because 2 meetings were postponed, but hopefully we'll have those before the end of the year. Now, what do we do with this information? It goes into our marketing calendar. So this is the marketing calendar for the year. These are how we will approach the market. This is done in conjunction with our colleagues in the locality and in consideration of their priorities and in our cluster analysis. 310 Marketing is something we are piloting. We piloted it initially back in June. They're basically a lead generation firm. We tell them where we want to go, what our schedule is, what types of industries we're targeting, and they basically start dialing for meetings. And they have about a 7% yield, but you only pay them on a confirmed meeting basis. And it is a qualified prospect. Qualified prospect means they're going to make a location decision within 36 months, 36 to 48 months. And again, we pay them on a per meeting. They're not on a retainer. 310 does this for several other regional alliances across the state. They actually also do it for 2 state economic development organizations. They've also done it for people like Dominion Power. where they will find leads for you. It's not inexpensive, $1,500 a meeting, but if you look at the number of staff it would take us to make the number of calls to set up those meetings, it's a pretty effective use of dollars. We do stay in front of the business attraction folks at least twice a year at VEDP. We just went down and met with them. They're like a big site consultant firm, out of sight, out of mind. So we try to keep the region in front of them, what our activities are and things we're working on. And then you can look across there at some other meetings that we'll be doing this year. The two trips out west, or the Orlando trip, which we're not doing until the spring at this point, and then the trip out to the West Coast, those are being done where I can piggyback on an outside corporate board that I serve on, where the travel expense is shared rather than purely borne by the Alliance. And then you see Craft Brewers Conference, defense communities. We have had significant interest from craft brewers. It's hard to call them craft, they're sort of mega craft at this point, but things that would be the Stone brewing size. And so we are going to that conference in Philadelphia. And then the defense communities, obviously, we are the only partner for VEDP at that one. A little bit of things, some other items that we've worked on this year that deal with regional capacity, Bowman Consulting and F&R. I think I mentioned that we were considering this back in the winter. One of the things that the state is lacking right now are what they call project-ready sites. These are sites where someone could decide to locate and be up and running in 12 to 18 months. So very short lead times. So they are sites where utilities are in place, zoning is in place. Yes, sir?
What size sites are you typically looking for when you're actually using or carrying those with you?
Be 100 acres or more.
Okay.
That's, and the reason for the 100 acres or more, the state has a very low inventory of 100-acre certified sites. Matter of fact, there are only about 4 or 5 across Virginia today that are truly certified project ready. That compares, if you look at North Carolina and the states to the south, they're dealing with 30, 40 sites that they've got available. The biggest reason that people move away from us or any region right now is we don't have a building. Building inventory has been attracting a lot of interest because as people have waited and waited and waited to decide to expand, waiting for the economy to approve, now that they want to make the investment, they want to move quickly. So what we've done is we set aside within our budget to pay 75% of the cost of 6 site audits. What the audit would do, and it's picked by the jurisdiction, the audit would tell you the baseline. What do you have and what do you not have on a site, and what are you going to have to do to get up to what would be that project-ready level, which is basically level 2. And we could talk about this for hours, but we have completed an audit of property the University of Mary Washington owns in Stafford. That was about, Mr. Seeley, a 360-acre site. And of that 360-acre site, they've probably got 100 really buildable acres because of the topography. But they do have water and sewer adjacent to the site. They've got redundant broadband. They've got a main power line coming through that site. It is adjacent to their Stafford campus, and it has frontage on 17. So it's a very attractive site. But even with that, to get it to that project level, you're probably talking a $500,000 investment to get it how far it would go. But the purpose of it is to give both the landowner and the county a baseline to have or the jurisdiction a baseline to have a conversation about what it would take to lift that up. Within that $500,000, there's a significant amount of rezoning that would need to be done there. They've got to reopen some proffers. So even within that $500,000, there's not some insignificant fees that typically a locality would charge that, in this case, they may give a consideration to waive those so they can continue to move the site forward. We just completed an audit of a little over 80 acres in the city of Fredericksburg that is basically runs right along 95 across from Central Park, on the city side of Central Park. Just began initial work on an audit on the property that the King George County owns, the private property that they've got optioned next to their industrial park. in King George. And we've had some conversations with Stafford about what other site they may want, because we didn't count the Mary Washington site against Stafford County, Spotsylvania, and then Gary and I were just having a conversation about the site here. But we pay 75% of the cost. The cost of the audit's about $3,500. And we negotiated a package deal with F&R and Bowman to provide that service. And this is what a report looks like. It's pretty exhaustive. Let me jump over to the far right. I don't think NRV, which is supposed to be the box below UMW, that's New Richmond Ventures. It's an angel investor fund out of Richmond. They wanted to expand in our region, and we have been helping them connect both with the local governments, our colleagues in the localities, but also with the entrepreneurial community. They're basically a stage 2 funder. It's headed up by Jim Ukrop, and it's a very unique approach. They don't manage a fund, Mr. Thomas. What they do, when they've decided a project or a company is worth investing in, then they circulate that as an investment opportunity to angel investors, and they go in as a group. But it's only at the point that the principals of NRV are willing to put their own money in. But you don't invest in them in a typical venture fund. Center for Economic Research, we have partnered, and I think we had a brief conversation about this back in the winter. We have partnered with the Fredericksburg Regional Chamber to help set up a center at Mary Washington. We compete with other regions who have centers at places like George Mason, VCU, ODU. And if we're going to go out and market the region, we have to show an ability to produce information that's specific to our region, and we need to show that we have the capacity to do it here. And we have a 4-year university. They have a very good economics department. The first deliverable for them, we have a 3-year program with them, but the first deliverable is a commuter skills study. It is not, we know where people are going from, we know where they're going to, we know how long it takes them. What we don't know is what did they study, what are their skills, and where do they work. Those are the things we don't really know. The center is taking census tract data, and they're slicing and dicing census tract data to come up to give us a good profile of the skill set of our workforce. This has already paid off, and I wanted to share this story because it was worth the investment we've already made in it. We're in a very strong competition for a unique company that would be new to our region and also new to the state that tends to move in clusters. It likes to be around other like industries because they exchange and move staff and attract people. We are very competitive on everything, but they came back and asked a workforce question. Where are we going to get our employees? Because they have about 150 incredibly high-skilled jobs. And while I can say we have 60,000 people that leave the region, and 40% of them have a bachelor's degree or higher, I don't know, I can't give them a number of how many have the skill set for their industry. And it's very specific. Within the census data, they've got what's called fields of study. It's what you've identified that you actually have studied either in a 2-year or a 4-year institution, and whether you're still working in that field. So I asked the researcher on a Friday at Mary Washington if he could tell me how many people, if I went through and highlighted the 6 or 7 fields that applied to this industry, could he tell me how many people in that 60,000 hour commute have those fields of study in their background? And he did. And on Sunday morning he gave me the number, and it was nearly 2,000 people had the skill set that matched what that prospect was looking for. So at least we've taken the workforce issue off the table for them. In the Center, Transformation 2020, as you know, was a regional initiative led by the University of Mary Washington to identify issues across the region, broadband being one of them, transportation, a lot of them you all have been talking about here this evening. Those have been handed off to be led either by the Regional Commission, by the Chamber of Commerce, and other groups around the region. We've been asked by the university to pick up responsibility for continuing that going forward. Why that is important to us, and I think Mr. Akers mentioned VACO. There was probably a presentation at the most recent VACO meeting from a business group called Go Virginia, who want to create match funding opportunities for regions, and regions can be defined as 2 jurisdictions, not an entire region, who want to cooperate on an economic development initiative that has come up as an idea from their business community. Transformation 2020 has about a 30-member business-led advisory group, and so we want to reinvigorate that because there may be an opportunity for us to do some things across the region if the Go Virginia initiative that they're working with the General Assembly and the governor on goes forward. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, does board members have questions? I'll start with Mr. Seeley this time on this interview.
Mr. Chairman, I asked my questions sort of along the way.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Akers?
No, sir, I have no questions of Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Akers.
Okay. Mr. Underwood?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Black?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thomas?
Just one, Mr. Roberts, I'm sure Caroline is always notified when one of those prospects that hit the website is looking in Caroline, right?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay,
Actually, of the 40-odd projects that we've worked over the last 15 months, Caroline has had an opportunity to respond to between 35 and 38 of those. Okay, and actually you had one very specific, but when they were regional projects, Caroline had an opportunity to respond. There was about 38 of those that we worked. What I appreciate most about Gary is if he doesn't have it, he just tells me he doesn't have it.
Okay. Well,
Because the worst thing you can do is try to sell an economic development prospect something they didn't ask you for. So I really do appreciate the fact it makes our job easier and makes everybody's reputation better.
Okay, if it's not proprietary, how does that transition work? I as a business owner look at your website and I say, oh, I need 100 acres and I've got this kind of industry. How does it go from you, which is a cooperative regional effort, to Caroline-specific search? Is that you control the 3 or 4 sites that you're looking for in the area, or each locality controls their own site and their own application?
Yes. In effect, what we would do is try to dig a little bit deeper about what kind of information you're looking for. You know, what do you want with the site? How big does it have to be? Do you need a building? What kind of utility needs do you have? We try to build that into, and it comes from the state this way, an RFI, which is like an RFP. And then we circulate that. And each jurisdiction comes back to us with a response and a proposal to go back. We do review those. I will tell you, we do review those, and if we don't think one of those responses fits, we'll come back and say that doesn't fit. Because if we send that forward, and that happens to be the first thing they look at, and it's not responsive, they're going to throw the whole package away. VDP won't even forward it if you send them something that's non-responsive. So your whole package gets kicked, which is why I appreciate it when Gary just says, you know, have it. And I've never had to come back to Gary on a site.
Okay. I think that answers my
I
question.
hope that, it may be more than what you were asking, but that it does get circulated. We'll then forward it back to the prospect as a package. We'll put regional information on top of it. Then they'll come back and tell us which ones they want more information on.
Okay.
And at that point, you know, at some point, they have to get in front of the jurisdiction because you've got to be able to look them in the eye. So there's only but so far we can take it, and then they've got to come on the ground and sit here and talk to Gary, dig more into what they're looking for, and his colleagues in the other localities.
So really, until they get to a certain level of interest, you're basically the point of contact for the prospect?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean people don't come directly to you, because they do. You've got prospects that don't come through us. I'm just measuring the ones we touch.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. We appreciate your presentation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Y'all have a great Thanksgiving.
And you
Thank
also,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to fiscal 2015-16 first quarter budget report. Ms. Hatcher.
Good evening, Chairman Taylor, members of the board, county staff. I'll make this short. It's first quarter budget report, and it's short, best I can say. This is on an accrual basis, but I have included for all the revenues a cash so that you can get an idea of how the cash comes in, but we do have 60-day accrual at the end of the year, so 60 days of the 90 days is in the other year. So I'm saying this is short. You can see by the attached summaries, 10.4% of the budgeted revenues for the major funds have been collected or billed. 28.8% of the budget expenditures have been expended for the major funds. The general fund revenues for the quarter are $1,903,453, or 4% of budget estimates. On the cash basis, your property tax collections are slightly lower than the same quarter of fiscal year 15. Your sales tax revenue is higher than the same period last year and appears to be increasing slightly, which is a good sign. Your local communication taxes, again, like we've been going through the last 5 years, continue to be lower. Your business license collections are slightly lower in comparison to last fiscal year, but your building permits and recordation taxes are up slightly, so that's kind of a mixed message. Fines and forfeitures are also less than last year at only 9% of the budget. Your overall expenditures in the general fund are slightly above the 25% threshold, but most of your departments are below the 25% threshold. This is the first year for the first quarter report I've actually recorded the transfers to debt service in the first quarter. I normally only do it twice a year, and I did it for the quarter, so it changed that a little bit. All your departments are being conservative in their spending. Your school revenues are 24.3% of budget, and expenditures are 26.7% of budget. Social service revenues are 19.1% of budget, which is higher than last year, and expenditures are below the 25% threshold. Both revenues and expenditures are slightly below overall of what they were last year. CSA revenues and expenditures are well below the 25%, but I've already been notified by Ann Tyree that the expenditures will be higher, so they're coming. Your debt retirement reflects revenues of 44.5%, mostly due to the general fund transfer for debt service payments. Your meals tax revenues are higher than the same quarter of last year, which is good. Your expenditures are 46.5% of budget due to the time of the debt service payments. Your operating revenues for the utility fund are 28.3% of budget, representing 3 months of billings. Your operating expenses for the utility fund are 23.9% of budget, below the 25% threshold. Debt service for the utility fund is 68.1% of budget based on the timing of the debt service payments. It should be noted that the operating revenues still continue to be greater than the operating expenses, and for the 3 month operating revenues were $133,000 higher than operating expenses. But this is a little bit lower than what it has been in past years because the debt service has gone up a little bit. So it's counteracting until we get to the hump that Courtney Rogers has explained for doing on the debt service. Your availability fees are 30.2% of budget. You've collected 14.5 water and 14.5 sewer availability fees through September 30th. Your Dawn wastewater fund, the billed operating revenues are 24.5% of budget, and operating expenses are 22.1% of budget. The debt service for Dawn is at 50% of budget. Tourism reflects 18.2% of revenue connected and 27.5% of expenditures. Your transient occupancy taxes are still showing that they are increasing slightly, not by major leaps and bounds, but they are finally starting to move up a little bit. All the departments continue to monitor their expenditures, and we monitor the revenues, and that's the best I can do for you for the first quarter. Any questions?
Board members have questions?
Just one. We haven't had our audit yet to verify last year's.
We have not completed it, no, sir.
Okay. We will complete that when?
The county portion of it is basically done. It is being held up right now by the schools.
So we'll complete that by when?
I do not have an answer for you, sir.
I'm fairly curious because I know there was some discussion about the year-end funds for the schools, and I was wondering when we would know what happened. So we should know by the end of this calendar year?
I certainly hope so.
Okay, so maybe at our meeting in December, we might have an idea.
No.
Okay, as soon as you know, please send me an email
As to how the schools stand,
as to their year-end balance that we were talking about, additional funding for teachers.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. If I might add, I suspect there will be a 2-on-2 meeting with the superintendent and the chairman of the school board. That might be an issue you might discuss at that time, whenever the board decides to have that meeting.
I'm not necessarily sure that I'll have an opportunity to participate in that 2-on-2, but if I do, I would bring it up. If not, whoever's there, I wish they would bring it up.
Right, but I would, and that's my point, whoever the board selects, or whoever decides to be a part of that, could address that at that time. Okay, any other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Black?
As you were going through this, you were reading through this memo, and I was kind of following along. One of the things that you mentioned that wasn't in here was fines and forfeitures. I didn't see that, and you said we were at 9%. We were at 9%. Just so that's not in this. That's not in this memo.
For the fines and forfeitures?
Yeah.
No, it's, if you actually can see it on the actual page itself.
Okay. All right, that's all. I was just wondering. If you can just point
I
me.
kind of pick and choose different things to say up here.
Okay.
I don't
That's
like
all.
talking about these beans, as you all well know.
Okay.
You want to count them?
I just like counting them, I don't like talking about them.
I'll talk about it after.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, other board members? Mr. Underwood or Mr. Akins? Mr. Seeley? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Hatcher. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That takes us to appointments for the Board of Equalization. I don't know if any board members have appointments for tonight. Mr. Thomas?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I have one based on the requirements. They asked for a person who is involved in real estate, and I actually have a willing volunteer who's Mary Pitts of Pitts and Mans. She said she would love to serve on that.
Okay, is that a motion?
If I need to make a motion, so.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that Mrs. Mary Pitts would serve on the Board of Equalization representing the Mattapanai District. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify, what you're actually doing is making a recommendation
Right.
because
To
the
the
Board of
judge.
Equalization is actually appointed by the Circuit Court.
Right.
Mr. Pardon, could we get a list of who were the members for the last Board of Equalization?
Certainly.
Okay, other board members have appointments they would like to make now?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put Mr. Ernest Rollins on,
Okay.
as a possible.
Okay. Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Second.
I have moved in properly second that Mr. Ernest Rollins' name would be actually given to the judge and asked to serve on the Board of Equalization representing the Reedy Church District. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay. If other board
Mr.
members can, I'm sorry.
I would like to make a recommendation to the judge on the name of David Rababi
Okay.
for the Madison District.
Mr. Chairman, before we go any further, let's go over the ground rules for this. There's only to be 5 members and 2 alternates. And I think there needs to be a decision made on how those 5 are going to be chosen. And I think that every board member needs to understand what that choice or who those choices are and how that choice is made.
Okay, well, in the past, every board member has,
we didn't have a sixth board member before.
Okay.
Now we have a
Now
sixth
we have
board
a
member,
sixth. Okay.
and 5 was the maximum.
Okay, so what you're saying is there will be 5 and then 1 would be an alternate?
2 alternates.
Or 2 would be an alternate?
We need 2 alternates.
And keep in mind, 30% of your board has to be in the real estate,
Right.
development, real estate, construction field. In the past, for our 5-member board, we had 2 people that were they were either a realtor or they were a developer. And that is a requirement under the rule also.
Mine
Okay.
is real
Yours is
estate.
a real.
Okay,
Right.
But I think before we go forward, we need to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and how those choices are being made and how we're going to make
Because
them.
we got to decide what one district's going to be left out.
okay, 1 district well, 2 districts would have,
No, just one, 5,
Okay.
5 members.
so 5 members and 1 district would be an alternate. Okay, I still don't see why each person can't make an appointment, and then the board can determine who that alternate person would be. I don't see where that would stop a person from nominating someone for that district. And then the board, at the time that the Board of Equalization is actually set up, can determine who the 5
When will the
persons
Board
would
of
be.
Equalization actually be set up?
It has to be set up after the Board of Assessors has completed their work.
When are they completing their work?
I don't have the date on that.
Pardon?
But, Mr. Black, they will, Blue Ridge will be here at the next meeting to give an update, but my understanding is they will need through the end of the year to complete the field work. So you're looking at hearings for the Board of Equalization in January. Sharon Carter, I know, would like that they be appointed as soon as possible. There has to be training that has to be done, and we need to get going as soon as we can on scheduling the hearings.
I guess what my point is, every board member has the right to appoint someone to the Board of Equalization. If only 5 can serve, the board can determine at that time who those 5 would be and who the alternate would be. But that does not preclude a board
I
member
think we
from-
need to determine then, if we're going to do it that way, we need to determine how that's going to be determined. I mean, how are we going to determine which one's going to be left out? How are we going to decide which of the districts gets left out of this?
Again, I don't see why that's important. At this point, you know, you're going to have 6 people, and you got to decide which 5 are going to serve. But I don't see why it's important that
Well, I think Mr. Chairman, might disagree. I think we need to know the process before we move forward. I'd like to know the process. I don't have a problem with what you're saying per se, but what is the process that we're going to use to determine which one's left out? I think that's something that is
Well,
something
I think one of the things you would do is look at who the people are and look at the experience that they have and determine which 5 would be the best based on what it is that they're asked to do. We want people, from what I can understand, with real estate background, at least 30%. So if you have people on there who may not have that background, then obviously that person might be an alternate. I mean, it's up to the board as to how they want to do it, but I don't see why it makes a difference.
Well, I guess, yeah, but I guess my whole thing is I wouldn't think that any one of the 6 of us would pick someone that's unqualified. So then you're going to say you're going to take someone who's qualified and they're going to be the alternate. I guess, there'd be 2 alternates, that would be 7. That would be 7. So how do you, I mean, rather than going through and, just draw straws.
This is easy. Whoever has there's 5, and then whoever doesn't have 1 represented gets to have the 2 alternates. So if somebody doesn't show up, you always have one of your people there.
Again, I fail to see what the issue is. You got to appoint somebody, just appoint them, and then the board will determine who will serve.
I don't agree.
And that's fine. Mr. Akers, if you want to make your appointment.
Yeah, I've already made my motion to appoint David Rubabi, but I would also, I like what Mr. Thomas has said, is the fact that whoever the 6th person is, or the 6th district is that's going to be an alternate, then they have a chance to appoint both of the alternates so that they would have someone there.
That still doesn't-
I'll tell you what my concern is the fact that this is not an issue where it hasn't been addressed before when people leave the board. I believe that, whether we want to admit it and think it or not, but the Madison District, Lake Blandor are two major real estate revenue-producing districts. And I would certainly think that those two districts should be, Mattapan is another one, Carmel Church. And I would think those districts need to be represented on the Board of Equalization at all times and not be served as with an alternate member, just in case somebody else doesn't show up, they get to serve. I just don't think that's being fair to those districts because they're major revenue producers, whether you like it or not, and whether you agree or not, it is a fact. It is a fact.
That's right.
Could
Mr. Black?
Could we do one of two ways? Either someone's going to get left out. So either, with 5 of the 6, you either pick the straws A, or B, my thinking is you have 3, and you pick 3, and like Mr. Akers and I would have to agree on one, and then one per 2 districts. So Mr. Thomas and Mr. Underwood, Mr. Seeley and Mr. Taylor pick on one, so we have 3, and then you pick an alternate. You pick the alternates from there.
Pick the alternate from the...
Well, you have 3, so it would be 1 per 2 districts, because you can have a minimum of 3.
You said just have 3?
Just have 3, and then you pick alternates with 2 alternates.
I'm still going for the real estate person that I'm going to appoint, because I'm going to cover the whole county with that one person. See what I'm saying? I got a person that sells real estate throughout the whole county.
Who would appoint the other 2?
Well,
Mr. Chairman,
everyone have to agree. Agree with
Okay, this,
the 2 people.
Mr. Chairman, if you appoint a 3-member board, then you're only able to appoint 1 alternate, not 2.
I guess the concern that I have is, I don't think, the Board of Equalization basically is what citizens go to, or who citizens go to, if they have a concern about their property value, about their assessment. If you get your assessment and you don't like it or you feel it's unfair, you go to the Board of Assessors. And if that doesn't work for you or you're not satisfied, you then go to the Board of Equalization. And I'm just saying that every district, even though you may have one person that's going to serve as an alternate, I think that every district ought to have someone from their district on that board, even though one of them may be an alternate. Because certainly I wouldn't want the people in the Port Royal district to feel that they aren't important, or that they aren't, or don't have someone that they can go to in the event that they have a question or a concern about the assessment. So, and again, however we do it, I just think that each district should have a person, and then once you decide who those persons are, then you decide how you're going to choose the 5 people and who the alternate person will be.
But I still believe, and you're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman, what you say when you say that the Board of Equalization, and to be honest with you, the Board of Equalization cannot do what the Board of Assessors do. They cannot change your assessment. What they can do is equalize, and they look at other people around you and say, okay, yeah, they really made a mistake on yours. But when you're talking about the districts that have a large population and have a lot of homes and what have you, the chances of having problems, and especially with the Equalization Board, is more in tune than it is in a rural area, one that there are not many houses in it.
But everybody has the same population in all the districts. There's no one
Not the
district
same
with more
houses,
population.
absolutely not, Mr.
Same
Taylor.
population.
Not as far as the number of homes and businesses in a district, absolutely not. That's not true at all. Are you trying to tell me that, no disrespect to Port Royal, and I'm just only using them as an example, that Port Royal has as many businesses and houses as the Madison District does?
You said population, and I'm saying they're all the same.
You didn't listen to what I said. I said as far as businesses and houses are concerned. Population, I still say Madison District has more population than any other district does today. Now, when we did the redistricting 4 years ago, you're absolutely correct. It was supposed to be equal. It is not equal today. Get the population figures and see where the most people live. Even population. They don't live, or they live in Madison or in Western Carolina. That's where the majority. Mattapanai has a lot of people as far as Belmont's concerned. But you have Ladysmith Village, you have Pendleton, you have Lake Caroline. All of those developments are there. And the businesses that are coming, they need representation. And that's what I'm saying, is the fact that, you know, I would not want to see the Madison District go with a representation on the Board of Equalization, especially since there are so many houses and properties that have the chance of having issues with the Equalization Board. The Board of Assessors can go through and they can change. They can change the assessments. But the Equalization Board, they will equalize it based on the other houses in that particular area. And there's more of a chance of that happening than it is anywhere else.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I don't think we're going to solve this tonight. But in the cover memo, it says that the Commissioner of Revenues confirmed there's only a 5-member maximum. I mean, why would that be? Because the rule book says
State code says that.
And
3 to 5 members.
Why wouldn't it say something that based on the districts you have?
Should have asked Delegate Oric. I don't know, sir.
But anyway,
That's a stupid rule. I mean, put bluntly, it is, because now we're having this discussion and I'm wasting heartbeats.
right.
You know, the reality is, it should be the number of districts. And since you're saying it's in the code,
We can't change it. It's in the code.
Okay, and
I
again,
don't always have to raise stupid rules.
Mr. Thomas made his appointment.
Mr. Chairman.
No, let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Underwood made his appointment. Mr. Akers, you haven't,
I
you
do.
have a motion?
I
and
do.
if
I have a
If you
motion
get a second.
on the floor that says I would like to recommend the name of David Rababi to the judge for appointment to the Board of Equalization.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would recommend the name of Mr. David Rababi to the judge to serve as the Board of Equalization representative for the Madison District. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Seeley, would you like to make,
Mr. Chairman, I need to see who my board member was in the past and who the other board members in the past were also.
okay. And I don't have a nomination tonight either. But we do have 3. And when we come back on the December meeting, we can give those board members who did not make a nomination or did not choose a person an opportunity to do it at that time. And then once that's done, the board will then determine when the time comes which of those 5 people will serve. I mean, that's the only way to do it, really.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I did not want to wait, or the appointee that I had 4 years ago is now lives in Mr. Black's district. So the Madison district does not have a current member.
Right. Okay. All right, that takes us to the consent agenda. Agenda items A through E. Is there a item on the consent agenda that any board member would like to pull?
I'd like to pull C, please.
Okay, the request for waiver of community services rental fee. Okay, if there are no other agenda items in question, we can, I can entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and E.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second. Been moved and properly second that we would approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and E. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. All right, Mr. Thomas, you have a question about agenda item C.
The question is, agenda item C is the Virginia Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy is asking for a reimbursement of $80 for rental of the Community Services Center for a public hearing concerning a permit. So we're going to reimburse them for doing their job? When the delegate just sat here and told us how money was hard to get back from Richmond? I am not going to vote to give the Virginia Department of Mines and Minerals $80, 80 cents, or 8 cents. They need to pay the fee like everybody else pays the fee.
Other board members?
I mean,
You making a motion?
I'll make a motion to not pay that and pull it off the fee, and if you want to put a zero on it, send them a bill, put the zero on it.
Didn't they pay the fee to?
Yeah, well, we're not gonna, we'll send them I will make a motion to send a letter not to reimburse them.
Second.
Moved and properly second that we would not reimburse the Virginia Department of Mines and Minerals for the fee for the use of the community center. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay. We're at the 7:30 time period, but we will take a 10-minute break and we'll come back at 7:40. We will reconvene the November 24th Caroline County Board of Supervisors meeting. That takes us to the public comment section on our agenda. This is the section of our meeting where citizens are allowed to approach the board on any item that is not a public hearing. If you would like to approach the board, you may at this time state your name and your district if it's applicable. So at this time, I will open the public comment section of the November 24th, 2015 Board of Supervisors meeting. Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Is there anyone who would like to address the board? Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Okay, you may do that at the time. This is not public hearings, this is public comment. You will be allowed to do that when we get to that agenda item, okay? All right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Scott Mosier from Bowling Green District.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to update the board and members of staff that the fundraising program that was initiated by the Sheriff's Office and a couple citizens in the county, Cops for Kids, was very successful. We were able to raise the $5,000. So what we're going to do is meet at the community center at 7 o'clock in the morning on December the 5th. It's going to be 50 children, total of 17 families, and we're going to take them from here over to the Denny's who have supported this program, and they're going to supply breakfast to everyone that's going, a combination of the families, the kids, as well as some citizen volunteers to help the kids shop, as well as several deputies, well, numerous deputies. So we're trying to get a deputy for every family, at least 17. So once we have breakfast at Denny's, we're going to go on down to the Walmart area in Ashland, and they're going to get a $100 gift card per child, and they're going to be able to shop for Christmas where they wouldn't normally have a Christmas. Social service was instrumental in putting the list together and recommending the families that would benefit from this program. After we leave the Walmart, a day of shopping, we told them an hour, but they'll probably take longer. We're going to come back to the community center, and Walmart's going to donate some wrapping paper, and we're going to have some people here, maybe some volunteers from the school or some church group, to wrap the gifts if the parents would like for the gifts to be wrapped. So it's going to be a great event, and we want to invite the board to come if they'd like, any member of the board, and to go shopping with us and The school's going to provide school buses so that we'll all ride together from the community center to Denny's to Walmart and back. So it's kind of, everybody's pitched in for this program. We hope to continue this program from year after year. We raised well over $5,000, and we have some seed money for the following year. So it's been very successful, and I know several of you members of the board have helped us with the program. We recently had an event at Lake Landor that was, we went, but it was their event. It was the Pit Masters, and they chose Cops for Kids to be the benefit of that fundraiser, and they donated $830 to the program. So it was very nice. But we just thank you all for your cooperation in that matter and updating the board.
Thank you, Major. We appreciate all the work that you guys do, and certainly those kids will have a better Christmas because of your efforts. So thank you.
You're welcome. And the money is designed that they will spend a portion of the money on themselves, and part of the money will go to a family member or one of their siblings, so they'll learn about receiving Christmas presents as well as sharing with others and giving as well.
Thank you. If I come, you can buy me something?
If you come, I will buy you something. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Major.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before you close the public comment period, if you will allow Mrs. Hayes, Dr. Hayes rather, to speak during the discussion on the emergency ordinance that we talked about at the last meeting.
I will do that.
Okay, fine.
I will do that. Okay, is there anyone who would like to address the board on any issue that's not a public hearing or on the agenda for discussion? Is there anyone who would like to approach the board on any issue that's not a public hearing or not on the agenda for discussion? Finally, is there anyone else who would like to approach the board? Seeing no one with the intention to speak, I will close the public comment section of the meeting. All right, that takes us to public hearings. Text Amendment 06-2015, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of Caroline County by amending Article 8, off-street parking and loading requirements, Section 1.14. The purpose of this amendment is to decrease the number of parking spaces required for a shopping center from 1 per 200 of rental floor area to 1 per 250 of rental floor area. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you previously reviewed this text amendment when it was forwarded to you from the Planning Commission, and your first reading was held at that time. The proposed amendment would amend the parking standards related to retail sales establishments in a shopping center to reduce the parking requirements from one space per 250 square feet to one space per 200 square feet. This is typical of what we've seen in other localities' regulations when you have large retail centers such as we are being proposed here. As I stated earlier, our current parking regulations were written 30 plus years ago, and the parking requirements really were based upon the shopping period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, when your parking lots tend to be full and are 60 to 70% utilized the rest of the year. The applicant has noted that this modification would be needed to support the proposed Ladysmith Crossing Shopping Center. And the Planning Commission did forward this to the board with a recommendation of approval on a 4-to-1 vote. With that, I'll answer any questions that the board may have.
Does the board have questions prior to the opening of the public hearing? If not, we will open the public hearing for text amendment 06-2015. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Seeing no one with the intention to speak, I will close the public hearing and ask the board, how would you like to address this issue? Okay, Mr. Underwood has a question.
Mr. Fincham, in real time and space, looking at this change, what does it really mean in terms of car spaces based on?
The size of the space does not change. That's specified in the ordinance. In a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area, which this property is, the parking space requirement is 9 by 18.
So in terms of capacity?
The capacity on this site related to the large retail establishment, I believe, results in about 645 spaces.
Okay.
And under the current ordinance, that requirement is close to 740.
Okay. Thank you.
Other board members have questions?
Yes, I just had one question on the planning commission vote. The dissenting vote there, can you give me was there just kind of curious what the reason for that was?
I think it was a concern about the parking needs for the project in question, and really related to the size of the commercial development and whether we might need more parking than this ordinance would require.
I'm just kind of curious, when you make a decision on stuff like this, when developers, I don't know any of this, when a developer comes in and says we need X amount of spaces, or at least X amount of spaces, do they base that on the busiest day of the year? Do they base it on, how do they determine, besides square footage or whatever, do they say, hey, look, on this particular day, the busiest day, whether it's Black Friday or whatever the case may be?
Historically, that's how regulations were developed. It was based on the busiest day of the year. I think in this case, and I don't know that we have a representative from Walmart here or not, this is based, from my discussions with Blackwood, on typically what they see for this size project in terms of parking needs. So it's based on historical data related to other projects that they've developed.
And I guess, is this the same as it is like up in, say, the Spotsylvania or Fredericksburg? Is it the same? Are we adopting something that's very similar to what the Walmart in Spotsylvania has, the Walmart in Fredericksburg has, Central Park?
We looked at Colonial Heights as well as several other ordinances. I did not look at Spotsy's, but typically we have seen a reduction in the parking requirements for large retail centers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Fincham, just with regards to what we have here in front of us in our report, it says that they had, I just lost it of course, 793 spaces would be required under the current ordinance.
Okay.
And they're going to get 645 if we adopt this change.
Yes, sir.
My question is, they had the actual land area to have 793 spaces, didn't they? Because it was fairly large.
With a modification to the concept plan, there is sufficient land.
Okay.
Without modification to their GDP, they would not have enough land to provide 793 spaces. The GDP is based upon the 1 per 200.
But they would have to modify
1 per 250, I'm sorry.
They would have to modify their concept plan.
Yes, sir.
To comply with the actual 793 numbers.
With the current ordinance, yes, sir.
Okay. But they actually have the physical space to do it. So what I'm looking for is, in this particular case, we're saying we understand you have the space to do it, but because you are, or you have developed a concept plan that staff has looked at and they think it's okay, we are going to make this change to allow you less spaces, basically.
to develop the GDP as they have proposed. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Any question, any other questions? The only thing I would add is, it seems to me that 645 spaces would be a significant number unless they're going to be doing outrageous business. I would think that 645, I can't think of a place around here that has 645 spaces, to be honest. So, yeah, but they got 1,200 children, and they all drive new cars. Okay, how does the board wish to address this text amendment? Motion is in order.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve text amendment 06, 2015.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved in proper second that we would approve text amendment 06, 2015 as presented. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously.
I abstain.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Akers abstained, so it is 5 with 1 abstention. That takes us to agenda item number 5, an ordinance to amend Chapter 77, Property Maintenance of the Code of Caroline County by adding Article 9, Existing Building Maintenance Code. The purpose of this amendment is to adopt Section 103.4, Part 3 of the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code to inspect residential renting dwellings units for compliance with the code and to promote safe, decent, and sanitary housing for its citizens. The ordinance establishes the Carmel Church Residential Rental Inspection District and regulations governing the inspection and maintenance of existing residential rental dwelling units, including all our use groups as defined by the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code. Mr. Fincher.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, again, this item was previously brought to the board's attention, and a fairly voluminous staff report was provided to the board at that time, outlining issues related to certain motels in the Carmel Church area. The board authorized staff to go forward and prepare the actual ordinance, which you have in front of you. And after much modification and discussion between staff and the county attorney, I think we've got the ordinance that we thought we were working on. You also have the proposed boundaries of the Carmel Church Residential Rental Inspection District. You have a map which identifies those boundaries. As we promised the board, we have crafted that ordinance as narrowly as we can to address the issues that were raised previously with the Board of Supervisors. Both Mr. Whiteman and I are here. If you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer those for you.
Board members have questions before the opening of the public hearing? If not, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
If we, if the board passes this ordinance tonight, it becomes effective today or tomorrow?
It becomes effective immediately. We still come back to the board at your next meeting because we have to appoint a property maintenance administrator, or at least an interim property maintenance administrator. Mr. Whiteman, Mr. Culley, and I have discussed that, but we need to finalize that recommendation and bring that back to the board.
Because this company is now, they're advertising all over the county.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
And on that note,
Yes, come on.
can we visit a way of actually removing those signs
Yes.
as litter?
That's another thing
They
too.
are everywhere. I mean, I drove on the west side of the county. I couldn't believe every corner had.
Yes.
Jeff and I were just discussing which one of us was going to go first to talk about the signs, and Mr. Akers stole it, but they are on the ramp on 95. I saw them today.
They're all over Ladysmith.
So,
All over Ladysmith.
I will talk to Mr. Nelson about, in looking at them, they're all within a right-of-way, which is covered by VDOT. I will talk to Mr. Nelson. I am aware that VDOT will allow localities to actually address those sign issues on their behalf. I would want to talk to Mr. Nelson and then come back to the board to discuss how you might want to proceed with that. But I will talk to Mr. Nelson about getting those cleaned up.
Well, if VDOT allows the county to take care of it, wouldn't this be under our normal property maintenance, and all the time and materials accrued by him would be billed to the applicant or the actual offender?
VDOT has a specific program.
No. Ask VDOT for county permission to remove the sign.
Yes, sir.
That's all you have to do. Okay. Then it becomes a county property maintenance issue like we normally have, so we could then be able to bill him for taking those signs down. Work with me.
And, I don't know that that's true. It sounds good, Mr. Thomas, but I don't know how legal it is.
I think whether the county's gonna move the signs anyhow. Whether we get reimbursement from him or not is irrelevant. The point that we're making a statement to him, one is, this is a possibility that you could have paid $500 for us to pull up your signs, but we're gonna be serious about cleaning it up.
But I don't know if we have an ordinance in place that allows us to charge to take up signs. Now, it is not on his property, so it's not property maintenance for him, it is property maintenance for the people that he has signs on.
But no, they're in the right of way, so it's VDOT.
Well, I understand, but VDOT doesn't charge to take signs up. They'll take you to court.
Well, maybe we should ask them to do
Charge
that.
you to take them up.
And the only thing that concerns me, and certainly I don't have the signs need to go. I understand that. I just wouldn't want him to bill the county, since it's not, because my understanding is, I don't know that the county has the authority to remove his signs.
Major Mosier, I have a question, Mr. Taylor, because if that sign were to blow into the road, is that considered trash?
Oh, so now we're gonna say they all blew in the road?
Literally.
If it blows into the road, is it trash? Is it littering?
It would not be littering if it's improperly placed, if it's in the VDOT right away. VDOT has regulations on there, they enforce that, and VDOT normally will take those signs up. If it goes onto the person's property, it could be a combination of trespassing as well as, illegally putting the...
Don't think VDOT's not charging the county for that.
Major Mosier, could you call VDOT tomorrow on that?
Sure.
'Cause all you need to do is be at the intersection, of Ladysmith and Route 1, and it's definitely in there right away. I mean, there's just no doubt about it.
They're on the interstate.
Yeah, so could you call VDOT tomorrow and say, look, this is...
Absolutely.
I saw one
Yes.
today.
And it just looks like garbage.
I would definitely
And
call.
certainly, I just don't want the county to overstep its bounds. If the county does not have legal right to remove the sign, then the person could come back on the county for doing that. And I'm not an attorney, so I don't know that, but it just, if it's in the right of way, I would think it would be up to the state to move it, not the county.
Are they considered the same as, for instance, campaign signs?
Yeah.
So I cannot go and pull them up. If somebody sees me pull them up.
No, there's a different statute for the campaign signs.
So a different fine I would be incurring, right?
Yeah.
But, Mr. Chairman,
You might fall under
again,
Washington statutes.
I mean, my intensity and desire to have these signs is obvious because it's in the district that I represent. But the reality is, this is an unauthorized business. The county has already said you don't have permission to have that type of hotel suite.
Right.
And yet they're advertising? I mean, if we let this happen, think of what people would advertise.
What bothers me is the fact that if we have
That's illegal.
if that is illegal, what they are doing,
Their
but
business
still
is
we're
illegal.
having to pass a new ordinance that addresses it so we can even be tougher on them. Why aren't we enforcing the ordinance that, if we have one, that deals with the fact that they aren't allowed to have what they have in place? Kitchenettes, I think, is one of the things that we talked about, that they did not have authority to do those things.
That's correct. And
Well, do
But
they have
advertise.
kitchenettes?
the kitchenettes that we were aware of were removed the last time we went through and had to inspect those facilities.
When was that?
A year ago?
Right before they put them back.
That was when this new management company bought this motel.
A year ago?
Yes, sir, about 13 months ago, and they converted 8 rooms. Move over. They converted 8 rooms illegally with new electrical conductors. So we went in, placarded them, shut them down, and made them return. Now, from my visit a month and a half ago, what I've seen is a lot of cooktops, cord and plug, although I can't get in there yet. So we don't need to rewrite the ordinance. This one will get me in those rooms, and then all that can start getting out.
So we don't have the authority to go in there now to see if they have kitchenettes and they are not abiding by?
No, sir,
what-
not.
Okay.
Only on a complaint basis. This will allow us to then do 10%. Once we find them, we can expand the inspections.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, if board members are satisfied, we can go ahead with the public hearing at this time. All right, I will open the public hearing for ordinance amended Chapter 77, Property Maintenance of the Code of Caroline County. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this ordinance? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this ordinance? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this ordinance? Seeing no one with the desire to speak, I will now close the public hearing and ask the board to address this issue with a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion to adopt the amended ordinance for, or amended Chapter 77 of the Property Maintenance Ordinance.
Is there a second? It's been moved and properly second that we would adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 77.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask that you make one amendment to 77-34?
Yes, okay.
And line 4 at the end of the Board of Supervisors, put a period there and strike the rest of that sentence. 77-34, administration. Second sentence, such regulation shall be in writing. Put a period after Board of Supervisors, and then just strike prior to entry.
Okay.
Okay,
I amend my motion to that effect.
okay. Do you amend the second?
Yes.
Okay, so it has been moved and properly second that we would adopt the ordinance.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
can I just ask a question before?
okay, yes, sir.
I just want to make sure on this, Mr. Parton, we are going to discuss that part of this next meeting, the administration of this? Yes. Okay.
Okay? All right, it's been moved and properly second that we would approve the ordinance amendment as presented with the addition spoken to by Mr. Fincher. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. That takes us to agenda item 6, text amendment 05-2015, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of Caroline County by amending Article 2, Section 2, definition to amend the definition of rural recreational commercial use. The purpose of this amendment is to allow temporary overnight lodging dormitory to house attendees of various sports camps. Okay, Mr. Fincher.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, again, this proposed amendment was forwarded to the board by the Planning Commission with a recommendation of approval. This was discussed with the board at a first reading, and the board authorized the preparation of the public hearing for this request. The proposed amendment would add language in the definitions for rural commercial recreational uses to allow temporary overnight lodging, dormitory type facilities with a special exception permit or as part of the special exception permit for these types of uses, with the idea that teams, kids, etc., coming to tournaments, training at these types of facilities would have a facility on premises that they could stay together for the use of these facilities. This would, rural commercial recreational uses are by special exception permit, so this would not automatically go into effect to become a by right use. In the case of an existing facility, it would require an amendment to their special exception permit to include this type of facility. So it's not automatically allowed.
Okay. Board members have questions for Mr. Fincham prior to opening the public hearing? If not, we will open the public hearing for text amendment 05-2015, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of Caroline County by amending Article 2, Section 2, definitions to amend the definition of rural recreation commercial use. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jim Radvani. I own the Virginia Sports Complex, and this amendment pertains, I think, to the complex, which is one of the uses that would benefit by this. I wanted to come because, in case you had any questions, I'm here to answer any questions. I've been running the complex now, I guess, about 4 years, and we've struggled a bit, and it's not really about the money, it's more about giving back to the community a bit, and what we found is travel baseball is getting awfully expensive. The play's expensive, the gear's expensive, to stay is expensive. And it's really becoming a sport for the elite, and as you saw in my brochure that I gave you, we started a foundation, the You Deserve a Chance Foundation, which could help the underprivileged be able to afford to play baseball. The new commissioner of Major League Baseball is pretty concerned that the sport's, it's losing some interest, and we have to keep a lot of interest in the game, and if people can't afford to play, then how can they be interested? So our goal would be to provide some housing on the complex, bunkhouses. I mean, we have a big mess hall there, we have showers there, we have a lot of great things there already, so that kids could come in, stay, have a clinic, have a camp. If an underprivileged person can't afford to play, how are they going to afford to stay in a hotel? They cannot. If we could bus in 50 kids, have a nice clinic, Major League players, give back. I think the world is into give back nowadays, and there's a lot of people interested. The Nike Foundation, the RBI program, which is the revitalizing baseball in the inner cities, that they want to give back, but we need to have a vehicle to be able to do that, and some housing would be able to have kids stay there and really truly experience a great experience for a week, let alone be local kids could come. But if you're, we're very situated in an area that is close to a lot of inner cities. And you can get a bus and come from New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, or wherever it may be, and come to Virginia. It's not like Florida where you must fly. A lot of people could get here, but if you have to stay in a hotel, how are you going to experience you're not going to be able to. So we're really trying to give back. Our foundation is doing great things, and we'd like to have an opportunity to do that. The great thing, if you did pass this, my special permit is guided by you, so we could come back, put any requirements you would have in the special permit, and clearly the one that, I totally agree with would be a sewer connection would be required immediately to build any housing. So that would be immediate sewer. That's, you're going to need that. I'd work with the county to make sure the line is sized right so we could have any connections along Route 1. And I think it'd be a win-win for everybody. I actually want VSC to be a special place. It's a great complex, but it's a destination complex. It's not a, the demographics here in the area, it's a little tough, and a lot of people can't afford to play. It's when I charge a $5 gate here, people, in New Jersey, you charge a $5 gate, people don't say a word. Here, it's tough on people. When fees are $500, in New Jersey, we charge $900. So I need to be able to bring in some vehicles to raise monies, give back, and be able to really do things here maybe you can't do in New Jersey, and we're committed to do that, and I think the housing can only help us do that. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any questions at all. I don't know if that you do that, and this is my first public comment, so you feel free to ask any questions you may have.
Well, what we normally do is to give if there are other persons who would like to comment, And then when we close the public hearing, we will ask questions at that time, okay?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, just one, so you're saying, though, that you would do an immediate sewer connection prior to this?
To be able to have the housing. So if my housing was approved, then I wouldn't, I think I have 2 years to do my sewer connection. We would amend the permit to say, if you want housing, you must do sewer before the housing, which would then make it quicker, which would be great. Okay?
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding this text amendment? Seeing no one with the desire to speak, I will declare this public hearing closed. Board members have questions. Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Fincham, could you help me, please? Based on what we're doing now, we're changing the text amendment and the definition.
Yes, sir.
What Mr. Radvani just said was his special exception would be renewed to include the language, the sewer must be completed first. Right, or did I misunderstand that?
I think that's what he's saying, yes, sir.
Okay.
As part of an amendment to his special exception permit, the board can condition the dormitory on the extension of public sewer to serve the premises.
But that's not something we normally do on a special exception permit. We don't normally say in the middle of that process, oh, by the way, you have to connect to sewer. You know.
Well, you actually have a condition now that requires them to connect to sewer within the next couple of years.
Right.
In theory, the way this could work, he seeks an amendment to his special exception permit. You can amend the time frame for that sewer connection.
But if he doesn't, I've changed the definition, and what happens?
He still has to apply for a special exception permit to get the dorm because it was not included in the original permit.
Okay, that's the key point. So the original special exception says nothing about dorms.
That is correct.
So when we make this text amendment, which has nothing to do with his application, because it's our ordinances we're changing via text amendment.
Yes, sir.
Then he has to apply for a special exception, modification, change, whatever we want to call it, to do the dorms, at which time we will address the sewer.
Unless you want to include the sewer requirement as a line in the definition.
But then I'm saying, in that case, I'm saying any indoor, outdoor activity that has lodging should have to have sewer. But I don't necessarily want to say that for everything, because suppose the Redskins want to open up a training facility at Caroline High School.
I hope y'all do that.
And they wouldn't necessarily have sewer there already, but then when they want people to stay overnight, then we would ask them to have sewer.
You can do 1,000 if.
No, I'm just saying, do we want to make in the definition of something a requirement particular to somebody else? That's all I'm saying.
If it's going to be, to me, if it's going to be a fee-supported activity with temporary overnight lodging,
I'm just saying.
I mean, I would think that you would have to have, I think you would want to have sewer.
My understanding is this was what he agreed to. This is particular to his particular situation. Is it, I mean, is this not his condition?
It's not a condition yet,
Okay.
Mr. Taylor. I would suggest to you that staff would not come to the board without some recommendation addressing the sewer, which to date has not been addressed at the site.
Okay. Okay.
One last thing, if I may,
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thomas.
One promise, last thing. Mr. Fincham, by us making this change, we're saying every private fee-supported indoor-outdoor activity every one of them, because that's our new definition, you know, is gonna have to have, or that wants dormitories. If we add has to have sewer, that's for everyone. We're just making a definition change right here. So if we change it and add sewer to this, everyone that comes after this has to comply. But everyone that would come after this would have a special exception, probably.
Would have to, yes, sir.
So
Would have
we
to
would-
apply
we could
for a
address
special
those things
exception.
in the special exception. We're basically giving them an opportunity to have everybody who has that kind of activity a chance to have dorms on site. That's all this is saying. That's all we're doing.
Okay, yes, go ahead, yeah.
Mr. Fincham, I'm just curious, because we haven't looked at this but so much. If the definition is changed the way it is, the way it reads in the packet, does any business that wants to have such an activity have to have a special exception permit? Or is it?
The only change
by
to.
right anywhere?
No, it's a special exception use. So a similar type of facility, say it's a football training facility, they have football fields or soccer fields. It's a rural commercial recreational use.
But since it's not a by right use anywhere.
That's correct.
For this, then it's always going to come up for a special exception.
It's always a special exception.
And the board would always have the opportunity to put a condition for water, sewer, whatever it wanted, operating hours, anything else on that facility. So it would have more flexibility to deal with individual situations if you left the definition the way it is. Then my other question was, because I haven't looked at their current permit, but you're certain that it would preclude them from building the dormitory without amending it?
Yes, sir. Their current conditions speak specifically to what types of facilities they can have there.
Okay, great, thanks.
So I guess my question, and you may have already answered this, how can we allow them to do what they're asking without impacting all future dormitories or issues of this nature?
Well, you can adopt the definition as is. They still have to go through the special exception process to amend their current special exception to include dormitory facilities at their site. You can condition that. So as part of the special exception process right now, you can condition that requested change to address your concerns or the issues of the extension of public sewer to the site.
And remember, the conditions aren't proffers, so the board can impose whatever conditions it wants to impose as long as they have a rational basis for doing so.
Okay. Okay, board members have additional questions? If not, how would you like to address this issue? A motion is in order.
Chairman, I'm going to move the adoption of the text amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and properly seconded that we adopt the text amendment as presented. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Mr. Thomas, how do you vote?
I voted aye.
Mr. Black?
I voted aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Nay.
Mr. Akers?
Nay.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
And I vote nay. Okay. Is there an additional motion or? That's it. That's it. Okay, that takes us to unfinished business. Continued first reading, Chapter 45 of Code of Caroline County Environmental Regulations.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I, before we go on to the next item, I would like to change my vote on the previous item we just had. I voted aye, and I'd like to change my vote to no, if I may. Well, I'm not asking I may. I am going to change my vote to no.
That's fine.
As per parliamentary procedure.
That's fine. You can change your vote.
That's sufficient. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Continued first reading of Chapter 45 of the Code of Caroline County Environmental Regulations.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, several months ago, I believe it was August, we first brought this forward to the board for first reading. As I advised at that time, the Department of Conservation and Recreation reviewed our flood hazard regulations, which are currently contained in the zoning ordinance, pursuant to the board's adoption of the current flood maps, which I believe was done in 2009. They have determined that there are modifications that were required of our current floodplain regulations. At the time this was first brought to the board, Department of Conservation and Recreation was still reviewing our draft of their model ordinance. They have completed that review, shall we say, beat us into submission. We're basically adopting pretty much what they have outlined as their model ordinance, with a few, I guess, what they would deem insignificant changes. Anyway, we've completed our review process with DCR, and this is the ordinance that they have found to be consistent with federal and state regulations for flood hazard management, and we are bringing this back to the board now that they have reviewed it and blessed it for a continued first reading to see whether the board wants to go forward and hold a public hearing or whether you want some additional time to look at this. We are proposing as part of this that we take the flood regulations out of the zoning ordinance, put it in the county code with our erosion and sediment control regulations. If and when we ever adopt stormwater regulations, they would be part of this chapter as well.
Okay. Board members have questions for Mr. Fincham. All right.
Mr. Fincham, I looked at this in the past, and what I'd really like to see are change bars on what's really different, because I couldn't decide what I'd read before and what was new.
Okay.
Is it all new?
From our current ordinance, I wouldn't say it's all new, but it's been significantly switched around. But I think we can come up with something that identifies most of those changes for you.
Because it's difficult to read from memory what we talked about and then what was different, and I just gave up at some point because they all look the same.
Yeah, we kind of gave up too.
I mean, I understand.
I understand.
It's hard to discern what's really changed and what stayed the same, because if it's all different, it probably really doesn't matter. But if it's interspersed with things that really didn't change, then...
We can come up with a black line version for you that I think tries to identify the changes between the old regs and the new regs, as well as what we tried to do. I mean, this ordinance is not written from a local government perspective. It's written from a federal and state perspective down to local government.
And sometimes it's hard to articulate to somebody what the change is when you don't know what it was.
Yes, sir.
And how that impacts us.
Yes, sir.
So a lined copy would be fabulous.
We will try to construct or reconstruct that for you.
I understand. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions? Would the board like to continue the first reading or go to public hearing?
I'd like to continue it just to see the lined version.
Okay,
Can we go to January?
Sure.
okay. All right, we'll go to January. Thank you, sir. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 8, proposed emergency ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 21 of the Code of Caroline County prohibiting the keeping of dangerous, wild, exotic, or vicious animals. I know that there are several people here who want to speak to this, and whereas we normally don't do that, but tonight I'm going to allow you to speak. I would like that you limit it. I just think it's a couple. How many people want to speak? Just raise your hand so I can. Okay. If you could limit it to hopefully 5 minutes. I do want to give you an opportunity to do that, but I want to try to keep a little sense of control here as well. So, Mr. Fincham, would you just give a little brief overview of, oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, as requested at the last meeting when this was discussed, Mr. Emerson has prepared an ordinance amendment that adds the primates that Dr. Hayes referred to during the last discussion to the list of exempted animals. And that ordinance is option 1 in your packet. We do have some concern, and I know the Sheriff's Office shares this concern about putting the ordinance together so quickly within 12 days of the last discussion, and whether we're doing a thorough job there and ending up with a good product. So as a result of that, we have suggested a second ordinance that you could consider as well that would simply, it doesn't change the exemptions, but it does extend the time frame to remove the animal, if that is the case, from the current 30 days, I believe it is, to 45 days with the option for an additional 30 days with the board's approval. And if you do want to give more thorough thought to possible changes, that would extend the time period that we're talking about here that Dr. Hayes would have if, and I do say if, ultimately you didn't end up amending the ordinance to increase the exemptions. So that is option 2 in your board packet as well for consideration.
Okay. Dr. Hayes, I believe you had asked for an opportunity to speak, and I know the major and the gentleman in the back. So, Dr. Hayes, if you would come forward at this time, if you would like to address the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members, for the opportunity to speak again. I'll try to keep it brief. Basically, I'm going to reinforce what I talked about on November 12th. I'm the owner of 6 primates. They're all small primates. And basically, they meet the criteria for exemption criteria. They're not going to be a threat to the ecology of Virginia because they can't live out in the cold environment. They won't threaten the wildlife here in Virginia because they're herbivores. So they're not going to destroy any of the animals there, and they won't reproduce. Also, they no threat to people. I mean, my animals basically have never escaped, never bitten anyone, never gotten loose. So the likelihood of them getting loose in Virginia is slim to nothing. And also the care of them is no different than taking care of a dog and a cat. My animals been with me basically ever since they was born. They basically only know me and nobody else. They can't go and live in the zoo. They can't group house because they haven't been raised group house, so they would not be able to survive in that type of environment. So I hope that y'all will be willing to accept the amendment to allow the small primates to be kept in Caroline County. Thank you for the opportunity, and if you have any questions, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Okay. All right. Major.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, certainly thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. where it may not be normal. We know how important it is to this board to make an informed decision, and we have noted several objections to the ordinance to be amended, as county staff has met with our staff and done a tremendous job relaying our position on this issue, which you have before you. But we also invited the director of the United States Humane Society, who is the other gentleman that raised his hand to speak, who would be more qualified to speak on this matter than myself. But we know that an informed decision is always the best decision. That's why we afforded him to you today. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, good evening.
Yes,
my
sir.
name is Matt Gray. I'm the Virginia State Director for the Humane Society of the United States. The Major gave me quite a promotion just now, which I appreciate. I answered some questions that you all had when this ordinance was first considered back in the spring, as you'll remember. My organization, we're okay with an extension of the amount of time that's necessary for someone to make other arrangements for the animals that they've been keeping as pets or for where they're living. We really firmly oppose any exemptions for certain types of primates. It's our position and our belief, which we really think is strongly supported by science, that primates, regardless of their size, shouldn't be kept in individuals' homes. There are public safety and public health dangers that they can pose. I don't know the details of this specific case or these specific animals, so I can only speak to what we know of these animals, generally speaking, that they're not safe to keep in homes as pets, that they can transmit diseases, that they can pose a real public safety risk regardless of their size. I know that the Animal Control shared quite a bit of information with you, cases that we have researched both across Virginia and the nation where these animals have posed a public safety risk. We can also make an argument that I think is quite important as to what is the humane treatment of these animals and how they should live their lives. As you know, primates are sort of a few steps away from us. They're very intelligent creatures that require a great deal of mental and physical stimulation that a lot of folks simply believe can't be given to them in a home. We also know that the American Veterinary Medical Association and the Virginia Veterinary Medical Association share our position that primates shouldn't be kept in homes as pets. Having said all that, I'm much more of an expert on the policy of this than I am the biology of these animals, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, that you all might have.
I guess one question that I would have, in localities that have been faced with these circumstances, can you tell me any localities that would allow these primates to be kept in a private home situation?
Virginia, unfortunately, despite my very best efforts, doesn't have, of course, a statewide ban on primates as pets, so that's a real issue. So we have local ordinances like yours, which we think are very important. Unfortunately, it's created this environment in which someone can pick up and move from one county to the next if they need to, which is why we think it's really important that localities like Caroline have these ordinances. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, the ordinances look slightly different everywhere that you go. What is rather uniform about them is that they exempt, or rather that they do not exempt primates of any kind. There are lots of other animals, creatures that are considered exotics that are or are not included in other ordinances. I don't know of other Virginia ordinances, counties or cities, that have any exemptions for primates.
So you don't know of any place that a person could go and keep these animals in their home?
Mr. Chairman, I think you misunderstand. There are lots of counties and cities in Virginia that do not have local ordinances.
Okay, so they don't have an ordinance, so
that's right. Spotsylvania, to my best of my knowledge, doesn't have a prohibition on exotic animals as pets, but other localities do, like Caroline, have these ordinances. It's a bit of a mismatch all over the state. Did I answer your question clearly, Mr. Chairman? You can move next door to the other county and keep whatever primates you have. And then you might not be able to move to yet another county because they have a local ordinance prohibiting them.
Okay. Mr. Underwood.
Yeah, Mr. Gray, just speaking about the primates that Ms. Hayes has, survivability in terms of moving them. So let's say we have the ordinance that you can't keep the primates here. Then what is there a solution that you, as part of the Humane Society, would be willing to offer up a solution?
Again, I don't really know the specifics of this instant and these primates. There are sanctuaries. There are some sanctuaries in Virginia that accept primates. My organization happens to own several quite large sanctuaries in other states that accept exotic animals that work their way through the pet trade or roadside zoos and end up in our facilities. So I can't make a commitment to you here on public record, but it's certainly something we'd be happy to try and help with.
Right. Yeah, I'm not asking you to relocate. I'm just I was thinking about knowing that she says that they could not survive in a group environment. I think that's what Ms. Hayes represented to us. And so I'm just wondering what alternatives are out there.
I think for most people who are forced to give up their pets, their primates, they end up in a sanctuary. They all operate quite differently. There are some of those that are here in Virginia. Most of them aren't. That's probably the most logical option for someone.
Okay. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Other board members?
I don't have a question of Mr. Gray, so I do have a question of Mrs. Hayes. You've indicated, Ms. Hayes, that to me, with our telephone conversations, that the oldest primate you have is 17 years old?
17 years old, yes.
And the youngest is about a year and a half or so?
Correct.
Okay. How long have you lived in Caroline County?
Since December 1993.
93. And the primates came in, the oldest one came into the county?
Well, when I first moved here, I owned a rhesus monkey, and then after that, my next one was in 2000. She's 15 years old.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I guess my thought process, and I certainly have heard Major Mosier said, and certainly what Mr. Gray has said as well about these primates. And I had a discussion with Ms. Hefner just during our break, and I understand the concern that these people have. I understand your concern, Mrs. Dr. Hayes.
I appreciate that.
These are they've become family. They've become your your personal attachments, and we all have attachments. And I just don't know whether it would not serve this board, and I don't think the board is ready to make a decision as to whether we amend this ordinance or not that we have in place. But I do believe we need to give Ms. Dr. Hayes some type of feeling that she doesn't have to worry about on the 30th of the month that she's going to have to give up these primates and send them off to wherever. She's indicated to me over our telephone conversations that she is diligently trying to find someone else, someplace else. But you got to understand, this lady has a home. She's been here since '93, and it's not easy to get up and just move from this situation. I would certainly hope the board would consider, and I know it's not what staff recommended, and I know it's what Major Mosier would not want to have happen, but I would like to see us to pass the emergency ordinance. It's only good for 60 days. And then at the same time, we put a provision in the emergency ordinance option 1 that would give up to 60 days in order to give the individual a means in order of moving or placing the primates in some other place. That would give her, give Dr. Hayes, 120 days, it would give her 4 months or 5 months, or something along those lines, in order to find another place. I don't believe...
It's going to be hard for me to find somewhere else to move, because I will have to quit my job.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm not giving up on primates, so I'm basically going to have to move and try to find me another 10 acres so my goats can go along with me, along with my primates.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's not going to be an easy task for Dr. Hayes to give her primates up. It's not going to be an easy task for her to be able to, or have to move in order to be able to keep her primates. And she said she's keeping her primates no matter what happens and what this board decides. But I would hope that the board would have compassion for Dr. Hayes in the standpoint that it would at least allow her to understand that she doesn't have to worry about it for the next maybe 120 days or so as to her primates being taken away from her, or that she's having to move. And in the interim, I think you need to probably be, I'm not sure what the board will do with it after that, to be quite honest. But you probably need to continue to look for some place to move to. And I hate to see you give up your government job. I mean, I'm
going to have to leave my job because basically I'm getting the impression I'm going to have to leave the state of Virginia.
Right. Well, and I hope that you're not getting that message from us.
No, I'm not getting the message from you, but I'm just getting the impression from other people that staying in Caroline County, staying in Virginia is not going to be a good thing for me. So I hate to have to leave my government job of 24 years and start all over.
I would hate to see you do that as well.
Yeah, my boss would too. I've had this talk with him.
Yeah.
So.
But again, I don't know that, and the board may. The board may, after the next 60 days, decide, hey, we are going to amend this emergency ordinance.
Well, I
don't know.
I hope they do, because my vet told me that, if I had to give up my 15 and 17-year-old monkey, that they probably would die. Because right now, my 17-year-old, since he's out in the garage, because he was living in the house, I had my 2 oldest monkeys in the house. Now that he's in the garage, he's not eating very well, so I have to syringe feed him 3 times a day to keep enough food in him to maintain his body weight. And hopefully he adjusts to being out there and start back eating. So.
Other board members?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a couple concerns. My first concern is, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, we did tell a lady that did have different monkeys that she had to get rid of them within, 30 days, 60 days? So I do have that concern. The second thing is there someone from animal control here? Could I get you to come up, please? Yes. I know you had given us pictures. My concern is, can you just describe the pictures? Are you the one that took the pictures, ma'am?
Deputy Carty took the pictures. I was with her that day, but she was actually the one who was taking them. Can you describe the conditions? The conditions inside the home where the pictures were taken, the cages that were seen were not cleaned at the time. There was a lot of urine and feces in the cages. There were several more out in the garage that were in the same condition, and when we spoke with Mrs. Hayes, she did admit that she only cleaned the cages once a week. The actual condition of the home, Mr. Whiteman may be able to talk about that a little bit more, but our concern was basically with how the animals were being housed and the conditions that they were living in.
So that was a major concern, is actual...
Yes, actually, by law, we could have seized every animal that she had on the premises that day. But in an effort to spare the county the expense, and animal control does not handle primates, has never had to handle primates, we really didn't know what to do with them. She had an alternative there with a garage that was heated and air conditioned, relatively new building. We asked her to move all the animals out into clean cages, into the garage, and clean up her act and not have them in the house where she was having some other issues with construction. The floor was caving in.
Thank you. I guess my question is this: if you were to, because you guys deal with basically cats, dogs, so forth, yes, correct?
Yes.
So if you were to come across a dwelling with, I guess, in the same situation with dogs and cats and living in this type of condition, what would be your protocol?
In the same circumstance, if there was an alternative where they could actually be placed someplace else like the garage, we're always thinking about the well-being of the animal versus, the expense, because whenever we take anything in on a seizure, we have to take it to the animal hospital and have it vetted. So that opened up a whole different situation with the primates, because You have to have a special vet for that. You just can't take them to Carolina Animal Hospital to have them checked out like you can a dog or a cat. So each situation varies. You know, in that same situation, she actually had several dogs there on the premises that we would have seized as well. And we asked her to get them to the vet, you know, within a time frame and to get their cages clean, and she did that. We went back a week later, and she had taken the dogs to the vet and updated their vaccines.
So as far as the primates are concerned, if this was legal in Carolina and you came across a situation...
We'd have to seize them.
You'd have to seize the primates, and then from there you'd have to find them a special vet.
Primates are held in the same category under the code as a companion animal. So there has to be adequate food, adequate water, adequate shelter that's properly cleaned.
And then you would have to find a special vet,
Yes.
I mean, to take them to.
Yes.
And how many, just out of curiosity, where is the...
Fredericksburg is probably the closest place that would have one. We have nothing here in the county.
And when you have a cat and dog situation, you take them...
Take them to Carolina Animal Hospital.
Take them to Carolina Animal Hospital. Mr. Whiteman, can you speak to me on the board on the conditions that you witnessed?
Yes, sir. I got the animal control's report and the photographs, and I went by and visited Mrs. Hayes, and I can speak for the dwellings because that's all my jurisdiction. Went inside. Her house has deteriorated somewhat. She had originally in the picture some holes in the floor, but when I visited, they were covered with 3/4-inch plywood, which we normally use for subfloor underlayment. I talked to Mrs. Hayes, and she has a contractor who built her garage where the animals were moved to, and her and the contractor were in discussions about, do we save this old dwelling or do we maybe build something new? So I explained to her that by the building code, I couldn't condemn a structure unless there was an imminent threat to her safety, and from what I've seen in the structure, there was no imminent threat. She's lived here since '93. It's deteriorated. There's deterioration to any house. This may be a little more excessive than most, but she did take the remedial action of getting the holes covered with the plywood, and I directed her to have her contractor call me, and we could discuss what the minimal repairs that I thought would be needed for a private residence. Again, this is not a rental unit that's covered by the code in the ordinance that we passed tonight. This is a private home. We don't go into private homes and tell people what to do unless there's an imminent threat to life safety. I didn't find an imminent threat, but I did discuss with her contractor the minimal things that I thought that needed to be done, or as I was. He called me, I called him back, left a message. We have not talked about the things, but we're back and forth. We're playing phone tag. So there are some repairs I'm recommending that she take and have him abate so that it is safe for her and the animals in the structure.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteman. I appreciate it.
Other board members? I guess my concern is when this first came before the board, it was my thought that we were looking at trying to do some type of extension so Dr. Hayes would have time to relocate. But then in discussion and talking about the issue, somehow we ended up talking about an emergency ordinance. As far as, I've heard words tonight like compassion. I do have compassion. And everybody who comes in here, I have compassion for, and I want to do what I can do to assist them in any way that I can. I think that's what elected officials do. But the concern that I have in this issue is I'm afraid that we will be opening the door to other issues. My vote has nothing to do with Dr. Hayes. I've heard Dr. Hayes speak, and I believe what she says. And I'm not sure that her animals are a threat. But I'm afraid if we pass this ordinance, we may be inviting other persons whose situations may not be the same. And to be honest with you, that's the concern I have. I will certainly support an extension to give her an opportunity to find a place, but I don't want to place animal control and the citizens of this county in a situation that very well may be dangerous. Not because of Dr. Hayes, but for whoever may come behind her. So that's my take. And the decision is up to the board.
Mr. Chairman, and I certainly heard what you said about compassion. I did mention the word compassion, and I still feel that's important. But also, all I'm basically asking is that we do pass the emergency ordinance. Now, Dr. Hayes has been here with her primate since 1993. Now, I don't believe you'll convince me, no matter what you may say, and how elaborate you may say it, but you'll not convince me that the next 60 days is going to make a difference, that these primates are going to become so dangerous until the people of Caroline County are going to be in danger. I'm sorry, it's just not, I don't believe it's something that's going to happen. And all I'm asking is the fact that we allow Dr. Hayes the ability, we provide for her the ability to have up to 120 days is what you're doing. Because if we put into this ordinance, this emergency ordinance, a 60-day, you get 60 days for the emergency ordinance, then they would have 60 days. If the ordinance is not, this is only good for 60 days. A board at that time in 60 days is going to have to approve an ordinance that either adopts what is in the emergency ordinance or does not adopt what's in the emergency ordinance. And so it does give her some time to find a place to move. She's indicated to the board that, and I believe her from the standpoint that she has tried to find some place to move, but she's not been able to at this point. I'm just asking that we give her the time. And if you want to change it to 120 days, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But I would like to give her more than 60 days, or 45 days is what the ordinance has said, that we give her more than 45 days in order to find a place to move where she may be able to live with the primates that she wants to live with. And that's just the way. Option 2 does give her extension. Option 2 gives her just the extension. It gives her extension for 45 days.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
That's all right.
That's my mistake. My feeling is that after hearing and getting all the information, I can certainly see that. I don't think we need to change the ordinance. I think we need to look at an extension, giving her an opportunity to, and I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you, Mr. Akers. I think we can show compassion, yet we can enforce the ordinance as we passed. And that is by giving an extension without doing anything to the ordinance, but certainly asking Ms. Hayes to be diligent in her effort to meet the move for the animals within the allotted time period. I think we can have both. I think that's the best of both worlds. But I do not want to change the ordinance.
Option 2, is that an emergency ordinance or is just an amendment to the ordinance? That's an emergency ordinance as well. Can we, would the board be in agreement to extend the period? Because I think now she has a total of maybe 75 days. 75 days. So can we extend that to give her a little bit longer?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thought the original ordinance said that an extension could be granted by the board.
No.
Wasn't that, we took that out?
It was never in it.
I thought we talked about that. Okay.
The second option changes the original 30-day period to a 45-day period and gives the board the option to grant an additional 30 days upon request of the applicant or animal owner. And of course, those, and that's all it changes, and it does that in a, even though the whole paragraph is reprinted in the emergency ordinance for you to see the context, the only thing that really changes is the number of days of notice and that additional 30-day period. So if you came to it, if that's what you wanted to do, but you wanted to give, you wanted to change it to some other period of time, you could easily do that.
So what you're saying is if we wanted to, if the board agreed to give her a total of 120 days, if that's what the board agrees to, you're saying that we would be in power to do that?
You could put the 120-day period into the emergency ordinance and adopt that, yes, sir. The only procedural issue with doing that is that it expires in 60 days, which is before the 120 days is up, unless you re-adopt it after a public hearing as a regular ordinance, not as an emergency ordinance. Does that make sense?
No.
Yeah, it does to me, but didn't we have the option to have a follow-up emergency ordinance? They're only good for 60 days. So November 24th, I got one that's good till January 24th.
Oh, and then redo it?
And theoretically, I could do the same thing in January 24th? Theoretically, because life would be
Probably in theory. I think I'd only do it in 60-day increments if you're going to do that, because the 120-day, it just doesn't match up.
Okay, so you're saying we could do 60 days?
Yeah, it's only good for 60 days.
And then if the board at that point wanted to
do another
one, that would be up to the board at that time. That seems to be the best option that we have right now.
Well, you have another option is you could make that, we could adopt that at the December meeting, which would give a little more time by delaying it now.
But she's got to have it gone by the 30th of November.
Yeah, she's got to be gone by the 30th of November.
Who said that?
That's what the original.
I think that's just based on the original time frame and when the notice came out.
So,
Will the sheriff give her 8 days?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. What was the question?
Would your office give her 8 additional days?
Major, I think he's asking if you would not enforce
Yeah.
the ordinance. The current order requires her to have the animals gone by the end of November. If she doesn't, then the animal control officer can seize them. And I think the question is would the sheriff's office agree or be willing to not do that until the board meets again on December the 8th?
I think the position of the sheriff's office and Sheriff Lippa is that, we want to work with this board, and whatever your decision is, we will definitely abide by that decision, and we certainly have no objection to any type of extension, and that's one of the things that was met with the staff, that we could definitely give this woman some more time, but it needs to be, we need to be all involved as a team effort to make the, appropriate decision. So.
I guess the only thing that concerns me is what position does that put law enforcement in? If
Get asked a question.
Okay.
That's the position puts him in.
Now, Mr. Chairman, it seems like we're going to get into a position, and in all fairness, Dr. Hayes has been here for 23 years.
Yeah.
Or 22 years. Had it not been for somebody tipping over an alarm or something, nobody would have known they were here. But the reality is, whether we like it or not, we do have an ordinance. And, it's much like the speeding ordinance we have that people don't seem to like. If we want to be as compassionate as possible within our realm, we have no choice than to do a 60-day extension now and try in January to do another 60 days if that would give her time. I heard her, and I was actually very quiet during this whole discussion because I feel bad for somebody who says they have to give up their home and give up their job.
I do too.
And that really means a lot, but I'm willing to work with Dr. Hayes any possible way we can. And you know I always dance on the edge of the ledge, so any kind of way we can, I'll work with it.
It seems as though 60 days is what we're going to be able to do.
I just got one question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
During that 60-day time frame, is law enforcement being able to check in on the condition? Because these conditions are deplorable. I mean, look at them pictures. These are deplorable. So we talk about compassion. I understand that, but these conditions, that does not. I would not have a dog or cat in that situation.
Okay,
So,
but based on what, just a minute, based on what they said, they had gone back and had seen improvement.
We can keep up with the situation.
Thank you.
And we'll work with Doctor.
Thank you.
So they've seen improvements. Okay.
Let me ask a question. One more
Yes.
question. The option 2 ordinance says 75 days. So if we approve that, does she get 75 days? Or does she still just get the 60 days since the ordinance is only good for 60 days?
I think, I mean, the idea when that ordinance was prepared was that it would be ultimately readopted as a permanent ordinance.
And 60 days.
So we still have you'd still have the same sort of problem.
Okay.
But frankly, the way it's worded, right now, if you just put in 60 days, it's going to read that it's 60 days from the date that notice was received to remove the animals, which was probably about 30 days ago. So that only nets out about 30 days. So it would make sense probably to put it at 90 days, which would give you the 60 days until it expires, and then you could redo it for another 60 days after that.
Oh, as long as we stick to when notice was served.
I think you have to factor that in.
Okay, that was.
Yes, sir.
And since notice was 30 days ahead of time, our 60 days our 90 days would still be in that 60-day window.
Right.
Because no matter what we put in this ordinance, at the 61st day, it goes away.
It goes away unless you've gone through the public hearing process and readopted it.
Right, but it's going to go away, period.
Right.
Because we would have to, if we don't do anything, it goes away, or we adopt a new permanent ordinance.
Yes, sir. And and part of what what Mr. Parton mentioned earlier, I think staff was thinking that they might do some more research on the entire issue within the extension period and see if there's something else that could be proposed as a permanent ordinance. I don't know if that's possible or not.
Okay, we can entertain a motion for 90 days, which will include the 30 days that's already.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that, I'll make a motion that we approve option 2, but changing the 60-day to allowing a 90-day from the date of notice.
Just to make it,
Changing the
just
45
to change
days
the
to
45
receive
to
to
90 days and delete the sentence about the 30-day extension.
Okay, that's my motion.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we would change the 45-day to 90 days. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask you as the chair to direct staff to place this on the second meeting in January's agenda? Because that's when it'll come up.
And I'll come down if you like.
I would love to have it.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 9, proposed amendment of solid waste convenience site standard operating procedures manual. Is that you, Mr. Parton?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you recall, this item was also discussed at the last meeting, and there appeared to be consensus on the additional hours, adding Saturdays, new Saturday hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but not for opening the sites on Wednesdays again. And there also appeared to be support for closing the sites for a half-day on Christmas Eve, but again, not the additional holidays that staff had previously recommended. There was no action taken on any of those items to actually amend the the solid waste procedures manual, so we would ask that you do that. But the main item that was not resolved and the board wanted more time to consider was the recommendations on the accepting construction waste under limited circumstances in small amounts at the Bowling Green site only. So staff's looking for guidance from the board on those issues.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, sir. Mr.
I didn't have a problem with the additional hours, and I think Mr. Schiebel has been in contact with someone recently who could talk about the retaining wall and things of that nature. But I thought we were going to give us a little more time to discuss construction debris, and I thought we were going to look at that like in January. So
whatever the board's pleasure is, I
mean, that was something we talked about before.
What we could do is, if the board doesn't have an issue with it, we're probably not going to see a major change between now and January anyway. We can just refer this to the agenda in January, and the board can make one decision at that time if that's agreeable.
Now, if he wants to extend the hours now, that's fine.
But okay, I duly noted. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I talked to a couple of folks who work at the convenience sites, and they were concerned, a couple of people were concerned at different sites, that we didn't really get their input in terms of what they thought. I mean, they know the heaviest days of trash usage, and I think we may have need to do a little more investigation as well.
Duly noted.
I'm not sure how other board members feel, but I mean, no question we need.
I thought it was brought to us that 7 in the morning opening was like one of the key times that needed to be done. And I thought that had gone through staff. So this is news. I mean, because we're opening now, what time, Mr. Schiebel, 9?
No, before 9.
Saturday.
I
think it's Saturday.
I suppose at 8 o'clock, that's open.
Not Saturday.
Saturdays, we open at 9 a.m. and we close at 5 p.m.
On Saturday.
On
Right,
Saturdays.
and that's what we were talking about, was 7 to 7 on Saturday. That was the one change.
But when we said that at the last meeting, Mr. Schiebel said we'll do that start in January.
But the board never made any official motion to do that or appropriations of budget.
But I mean, that's what you said, we'll do it in January. So you didn't start doing it right away.
We said we're going to start in January timeframe, but the board never made an official motion.
Okay. Why do you have to wait till January?
We didn't. We were just trying to get everything straight because we got to change the signs.
Okay. And is the landfill open tomorrow since it's Wednesday and it's the day before Thanksgiving?
It is not.
So it's closed 2 days in a row?
Yes, sir.
So my trash is still there. Okay, my bad.
We'll throw it over the fence, right?
I thought sure it was going to be open the day before Thanksgiving.
We have in the past, we did not do it again last year, but the 3 years prior to that, because we're normally closed, people don't come. It is, nobody shows up because they don't even read the paper that they're open on Wednesdays and think about it.
Mr. Underwood talked about, and I don't know how the board feels about this, but his suggestion was talking to other employees at the various sites. And I don't, and that's up to the board.
Have you talked to the folks working at, what's their response?
To opening additional hours, depending on the employee, some of them want to work as much as they can. We go by the complaints that we get at the office of when people call. Saturdays are our biggest complaints. Why are you closed on Wednesday is our second complaint. Why are your hours on Sunday is our third complaint. So those are the complaints that we get on a regular basis at the office. So it's really driven by the citizens, and we're here to serve the citizens, and as the board directs us to do.
And I think the other thing is the more people you ask, the more different opinions you're going to get as well. So.
Did we find somebody to talk to about the brick wall?
I did, and spoke with them, and they said that would be something that they might be able to do in the spring of the year. As we're coming into the time of year that's not the best to do that.
Yep.
We would have to have an engineer to engineer the wall so it could be built since it is going to be retaining the earth there.
Right.
But they thought that that was something that could be done, provided that the class moved forward.
Okay. Two things. We can extend the hours and make that immediate, and then come back in January for any other changes, or we can just table the entire issue until January. It's up to the board. Again, we can extend the hours now and then come back in January for additional changes.
Weren't we saying we could extend the hours now? Mr. Sheba was saying there wasn't a budget allocation. I think I saw $16,000 in here for the hours.
That's an annual expense on behalf of that.
Annual expense.
Yes, sir.
So if we do it now, we are 6 months into the fiscal year, so it'll be half of that.
That's correct.
So I'm sure we can find that much money to extend the hours now.
Just make a motion.
Well, we really have to be fair to Mr. Shebel and start it in January so they have time to change signage and people understand it's changing. And you've got to line up employees to work that.
How long does it take to put a sticky thing over the?
It doesn't take long. The biggest
Okay.
thing is schedules out. We just got to change schedules and get people to work additional hours. That can be done.
You can do it in December?
Yes, sir.
Sometime in December?
We can start whenever the board would like.
I'll make the motion that we extend the hours of the convenience sites on Saturday as staff has recommended from 7 to 7.
Second.
And that Mr. Sheba will start those in December as his staffing requirement schedule allows. Second.
Second.
Okay.
Are we also going to add half a day on Christmas Eve to the holiday schedule?
Well, Christmas is on a Friday this year, so I don't have to worry about not going to the thing on Wednesday because I can go Thursday. But if I only have half a day on Thursday, I've missed Wednesday. Then if I miss the half a day Thursday and you're closed on Friday.
Buy an extra garbage can.
Some of us don't live in the town and have that luxury.
We only have trash pickup once a week. You miss Friday, you're done.
Well, you're going to miss Christmas. You'll be done this.
Well, we're already figuring we're missing Christmas. That was the very discussion.
So you should sympathize then. I'm just saying. If you want
So your motion does not include the
my motion
half
had
day.
nothing to do with
The half day.
Wednesday, the day before Christmas.
Exactly.
I'm just saying extend the hours. If I could call the question on my motion, I would appreciate it.
Question? It's been moved and properly second that we approve the extended hours as presented. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. The proposed visitor center rental policy. Is that?
Mr. Chairman, the two unresolved issues with regard to this proposed policy was determining the cost to rent the facility and also clarification on the insurance coverage of the building and its contents. And staff has proposed a fee to rent the facility. It ranges from $175 for 1 hour, which would be the minimal time period. Then it increases by $25 per hour until you get to $250 for the 4-hour maximum rental. That's made up of $125, which is our cleaning cost that we've been quoted to clean the facility, $25 for setup and takedown, and then $25 an hour to cover the personnel, because there may be times when we have to pay overtime to full-time personnel to be able to do that. With regard to the insurance issue, we talked to Vacor, the county's carrier, and they advised that, strongly recommended that we require a certificate of liability insurance coverage that names the county as a co-insured in the amount of $1 million, which sounds like a lot, but that's their standard recommendation for any type of use. And they did indicate that they make available coverage in that amount for $100 to $150, and You may even be able to get it cheaper from a local carrier. I don't know, but that option is available from Vacor for between $100 and $150. So those were the issues that we were asked to follow up on last time, and you have a draft number 3 policy before you for consideration.
Board members have questions? Mr. Black?
Yeah, I just have, first of all, I want to thank the staff, whoever worked on this, for putting this together. I just have a couple questions, I guess. As far as the insurance that you had just talked about, Mr. Parton, Vacor insurance, do we do that with the facilities here when we rent them out? Do we require that here?
I believe the current policy, and we may want to consider changing this, indicates that it will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. In light of what Vacor has just recommended, we may want to consider changing that to match this policy.
So as of right now, it's not
It's
required?
a case-by-case, it's not absolutely required.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, the other concern I guess I was going to have is, what was the reason for, I guess I'm thinking in terms of, you know, the rental. My only thing is, why not extend it for another hour if they have to pay, so that they could do a total of 5 hours if they wanted to?
You'd be at 11:30 at that point was the only thinking. It operates as a visitor center during the day until 5 o'clock, and so only the evening hours are available. We wanted to leave some time to set up and clean up.
Would it be possible to say 5 hours on the weekends, Fridays and Saturdays?
If that's the board's
So
desire.
we could do 4 hours on the weekdays and then 5 hours if they wanted to on Friday and Saturday?
That's the board's wish, sure.
Yeah, we could just...
It just raises the cost by 25%.
But it would be up to the user, I mean, if they didn't want to...
Well, I understand that, but they would have the option.
Yeah, but they would have the option, yeah. Okay, other concerns? If not, a motion is in order.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion that we adopt the policy for rental of the visitor center with the change, the amendment for 5 hours rental availability on Friday and Saturday.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we approve the policy as presented for the rental of the visitor center with the extension of an hour on the weekend. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Parton?
Agenda item 11
Mr. Chairman, can you just bring that back to us for these facilities then, if we need it for these facilities? Can that come back to us at December 8th or sometime in January as far as the insurance? Yes. Because I think if we're going to have the insurance there, I think we need to be consistent. Okay.
Okay. Okay, agenda item 11 has been requested to be pulled. The person making the request has asked for additional time. So that being said, we'll bring agenda item 11 back either at the next meeting or when the person requesting it is ready for the board to get it. All right, that takes us to agenda item 12, proposed purchase of replacement fire engine. Chief Loftus.
End of the night.
On a high note.
Very last one. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. After 33 years, I'm requesting the board consider approval to replace the Port Royal engine, or Engine 3. Engine 3 is a 1984 E1 with a 4-man open cab. It is the last of those for Caroline County. It means no doors on the back. With a 1,250-gallon pump, 750 gallons of water, and about 90 cubic feet of storage. The truck has seen its useful life. What we're asking the board to consider is a new 2016 6-man Pierce Sabre with 1,000 gallons of water, 1,500 GPM pump, and about 180 cubic feet of storage on the truck. Cost of the apparatus, we're asking for $436,579 with a prepayment of $300,000 up front to come from debt service. Also asking for a 5% contingency to come out of Fire Rescue Reserve, not part of the debt service,
of $22,500 for the truck. The engine for Port Royal is a little bit challenged, both in height and in length. And so we had to get a truck that was going to be much shorter than what we normally buy and a little bit less in length. So with that, we did find a truck, and we found it for a very good price. It will require some modification of the station, basically a 3-foot section where the garage door opener hangs down below the height of the door. It's a 10-foot door. Right now, the opening, you can get a 10-foot in the back, but you're going to run right into the garage door at 9 feet 3 inches. So we're going to raise that up to get a full height on the door. Spoken with Kevin Whiteman, and we have a plan to go forth and get that done. That'll be funded out of the operations budget in the next year. The truck will take about 315 days to build and about another 45 days to equip and be ready for service about this time next year. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're a year.
Okay.
Any questions?
Board members, a motion is in order.
If there's no questions, Chief, I think we talked about this before, but I would approve, or I would motion to approve the purchase of the replacement fire engine for the Carmel Church Station.
You know,
Good try, Mr. Thomas.
he's just full of jokes.
I'll make a motion that we make the replacement, we purchase the replacement fire truck for the Port Royal Fire
Oh, I
Station.
misspoke. Port Royal, I'm sorry. Port Royal.
Well, you can second it if you
I have a
Port Royal. You know.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second that we would approve the purchase of the replacement of the fire engine for the Port Royal Fire Department as presented. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, there are none, obviously.
Can we have them be in next year's Bowling Green Parade as the last parade for the fire truck?
We could talk to Chief Jenkins is here and John Wilkerson, both of Port Royal, and Dave is nodding his head.
The old truck.
The old truck, can we have the old truck in next year's Bowling Green Parade for the last time? That would be great.
To shape it in, though, you might be pulling it with something.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And that takes us to informational calendar items.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county offices will close tomorrow at noon and remain closed through Friday. Will be closed Friday for the Thanksgiving holiday. There's a reception for the new librarian, Amy Lilly, on Tuesday, December 1st from 5 to 7 in the EOC. Did want to call your attention, you should have a flyer at your desk that Caroline High School Military Appreciation Night is at the first home basketball game, which is December 2nd at 7 p.m. The board is invited to that. Chairman Taylor mentioned the Senior Citizens Gala, mentioned that again, December 3rd from 6 to 9 at Caroline High School. And that's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to the closing board comments. Mr. Thomas, do you have any?
Mr. Chairman, I forgot to mention one during my opening board comments, but with regard to the VRE station in Spotsylvania, I'm not sure who in staff is working on having Fred connect with that from Caroline or a bus from Caroline to there. Mr. Parton, do you know, or is that tourism or economic development or somebody?
I've been in touch with the Fred director about another matter, so I'll bring that to, yeah. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Black, do you have closing board comments?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Underwood?
No, sir, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Akers?
No, sir.
Mr. Sealy?
No, sir, Mr.
And I have none. We have no closed meeting? Okay, move to adjourn is in order.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and second that we adjourn. We now stand adjourned.